Chapter 435. Su Ming looked at the petite woman's stone statue in the coffin. As he looked at her face, the youthful voice by his ears seemed to have come from his memories, causing a hint of grief to gradually appear on his face. "You're awake." Di Tian remained silent for a moment before he spoke calmly. The hint of shock on his face had already disappeared, and he had regained his aloof demeanor. "I remember her," Su Ming mumbled. He suddenly understood. That dream might not have been a dream after all. The grief in his eyes gradually grew stronger and could not be dispelled in the slightest. Sparkles appeared in his eyes, and tears fell down from the corners of his eyes and fell on the stone statue. At the same time, at the instant the tear fell on the stone statue, pictures appeared in his head once again. In those pictures, Su Ming saw himself. It was a version of himself with red hair and red robes. He saw his red-haired self walking out of the mountain range in his cave abode and drawing out the earthen aura to turn it into a crimson dragon. He saw himself absorbing the power of many powerful shamans wherever he went. He did not even spare some of the powerful, ferocious beasts. He also saw his red-haired self head to Autumn Sea Tribe. He lifted his hand and sealed the heavens, and even Zhong Zhe was sealed in the sky. Then he lowered his hand and sealed the earth. Once all the members of Autumn Sea Tribe were sealed, he walked to the side of Wan Xiao, the holy lady of Autumn Sea Tribe, and picked her up. As his red hair danced in the wind, he left into the distance. Su Ming saw the entire process of his red-haired self casting the art of Yin Wan subservient to dragon with Wan Xiao. It was as if Hong Luo's short journey of few days had flashed past Su Ming's eyes at a speed that was several times faster than before. He also saw his red-haired self fighting against the old immortal. He saw the halberd in the sky cutting down his opponent in a domineering manner, and he continued casting the art of Yin Wan subservient to dragon with the long-haired woman, until the appearance of the shaman tribe's sacred mountain, Di Tian's arrival, the shocking battle, and finally, the scene in his head froze at the instant Hong Luo's soul disappeared. Then he heard his loud laughter and saw the path to rebirth being sent into his body. "I've been holding back my Tao for 30,000 years. When I look back, I will no longer be an immortal." That hearty laughter stirred up layers of ripples in Su Ming's mind. When it eventually disappeared, it turned into a hoarse and ancient voice. "Brat, listen carefully. I have a great enmity with Di Tian, but this person's strength surpasses my memories. I don't know how many years I've been sealed for, but now I'm going to return to the dust, but I'm unwilling. I am the son of an immortal emperor, so I will use my royal bloodline's art, the Tao of Rebirth, to grant you the power to undo the seal. This art will become stronger along with your cultivation until it can help you break through the seal of your memories. It can also change your blood so that you will have the purest blood of the immortals. It also contains my Tao, my spells, my divine abilities, and all of them will belong to you. I'll burn what's left of my life force and use the path of rebirth to send you to the coffin. I can sense that it's very important to you. Don't worry about the danger of facing Di Tian alone. I've thought of a way to help you resolve this danger. As long as you can hear what I'm saying, you'll definitely succeed. The path of rebirth can only be passed down to one person in each generation of the imperial family. Once it is grasped by someone, no matter how talented they are, they will not be able to learn it. This is the rule of the law. This technique could only be used once by each generation's inheritor. It did not have any offensive capabilities and was only used for inheritance. That was why Di Tian didn't know the path of rebirth, and he didn't know that this technique could open the gate of the void and use it to teleport. This was originally an escape door left behind by the royal bloodline, just in case. I once left an imprint at the place where I woke up previously. This door can allow you to return to that place. Di Tian won't be able to interfere with the gate of the void once it's opened, and the path of rebirth can conceal your aura, so Di Tian's divine sense won't be able to find you. In this way, you will have a period of true freedom. The reason why I didn't use this technique is because this technique can only be used once. If there is no inheritor, it can't be used. Also, if I use this technique to escape, it will be difficult for me to escape the seal. I'm afraid that I will never be able to awaken. I would rather die. The gate to the void is in your heart. Call it, and it will open. Your level of cultivation isn't high. But when you become a powerful berserker, you must help me take revenge and kill Tion. Su Ming felt a sharp stab of pain in his head, and those scenes disappeared in an instant. In truth, Su Ming felt as if a long time had passed from the moment the scenes appeared to the moment they disappeared, but this was just the flow of memories in his head. To anyone else, only an instant had passed. Hong Luo's voice had been imprinted in Su Ming's mind through the path of rebirth before he died, avoiding Tion's divine sense. He could only hear it when he woke up. As he stared at the stone statue in the coffin, Su Ming's right hand grabbed the side of the coffin tightly. You shouldn't have woken up. You make me very disappointed in you. Hong Luo was an accident. Now you will set things right. Sleep, destiny. Tion remained silent for a moment before he spoke slowly. Yet at the instant he said those words, Su Ming turned around swiftly and stared at Tion with his still, deathly still eyes. No one can seal away my memories again, not even you. A strand of hair appeared on Su Ming's right index finger in a barely noticeable manner. That strand of hair was formed by the power of the god of Berserker's one finger, and strangely enough, when Su Ming's body was under Hong Luo's control, that strand of hair had disappeared as if it had disappeared. Even Hong Luo had not noticed it. Yet now, as Su Ming's will returned, that strand of hair appeared once again. Since it did not let out a single hint of presence when it appeared, that was why even Tion did not pay attention to Su Ming's right hand, which was holding onto the coffin. Naturally, he did not see the extra strand of hair that had appeared around him. This was Su Ming's killing move, and it was also the reason why he could remain calm when he saw Tion. He had already decided to use the power of the god of Berserker's one finger, which he had always been reluctant to use. Even if he did not know whether he could kill Tion, who even Hong Luo was not his opponent, even if Hong Luo had made perfect preparations for his escape before he died. Yet Su Ming did not want to leave just like that. If he said he did not want to, then there was no need for him to say anything else. Tion's face was expressionless as he looked at Su Ming coldly. The instant his gaze met Su Ming's, he lifted his right foot and took a step towards him. As my son, not only did you disappoint me, you're also so childish. The moment Tion's foot landed, a wave of ripples immediately spread out from under his feet. The strength of that ripple closed in on Su Ming in an instant. A mighty pressure that he could not fight against also descended swiftly on him, causing Su Ming to be pinned to the ground. When the ripples spread out from under his feet, Su Ming shuddered and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Kneel! Tion's powerful divine sense and will gathered on Su Ming's body with a bang, causing him to feel as if there was a mountain pressing down on him, causing his knees to let out banging sounds and tremble viciously. What right do you have to make me kneel? Su Ming gritted his teeth and lifted his head to glare at Tion. His knees were straight. Sharp waves of pain came crashing into his body, but it did not make him submit. You unfilial son, I brought you up, and you don't deserve to kneel before me? Kneel now. Tion walked towards Su Ming and closed in on him. At that moment, the distance between the two of them was only 30 feet. As Tion's aloof voice rang out, Su Ming's knees let out a bang and blood flowed out. He staggered, and the powerful will and mighty pressure that seemed to have gained physical form descended on him. It was not something he could control with his will. His heart did not kneel, but his body was pressed down by that mighty pressure, causing his right knee to fall toward the ground. Yet the instant his knee was about to touch the ground, Su Ming pressed his left hand against the ground and gripped it tightly, causing his right knee to hang in the air 1 inch away from the ground. Besides a level of cultivation that far surpasses mine, what else do you have? You can make my body kneel, but you can't make my heart kneel? Su Ming lifted his head. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, and his eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Tion. That deathly stillness in his eyes caused even his expression to become deathly calm. Today, You used your great power to make me kneel before you. In the future, I will make you pay for what you did today several-fold. You won't be the only one. I will make the entire immortals kneel before me. I will make you, Dition, lower your head before me. I can do it, Su Ming said through gritted teeth. His words contained his determination, and at the same time, he called out the gate to the void in his heart. Dition's expression did not change in the face of Su Ming's words. When he was only 20 feet away from Su Ming, he stared coldly at Su Ming, who was only an inch away from kneeling on the ground. He looked at the veins popping up on his face, at the blood on his knees, and at the endless pressure he was fighting against, causing numerous blood capillaries to appear on his left hand, which was pressed against the ground. I don't need your heart to kneel before me. Your body is enough, Dition said languidly. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the center of Su Ming's brows with two of his fingers. Once he did so, everything would return to how it was a few days ago. Su Ming's memories would be sealed once again, and when he woke up once again, he would still be confused about his past and future. Behind him, there would always be a pair of eyes that existed in the dark, constantly watching his every move. Yet the moment Dition lifted his finger and was about to land on Su Ming, his expression suddenly changed. A power that did not belong to Su Ming, a power that seemed to belong to the barren darkness in the world, erupted from Su Ming's body with a bang. The strength of that power caused Dition's finger to freeze for a moment the instant it erupted. It was as if that power was fighting against him, and in the span of a few short breaths, Dition let out a muffled groan and took a step back. With that one step back, the ripple that enveloped Su Ming's feet immediately disappeared. The divine sense and pressure pressing down on him were also bounced off as that power erupted from his body. As that power erupted from his body, distortions appeared in the air behind Su Ming, and a gigantic, oval-shaped vortex appeared. The moment the vortex appeared, the entire world seemed to come to a standstill. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 436. At the instant the world froze, waves of suction force came from the oval vortex behind Su Ming. However, that suction force was only targeted towards Su Ming alone. All other matter was excluded. Dition stared at Su Ming, then at the gigantic vortex behind him. For the first time, a livid look appeared on his face. Without a hint of hesitation, Dition formed a seal with his right hand before he swiftly pointed towards Su Ming. With the protection of heaven, with my name, I, Dition, seal the sky and lock down the earth. The moment Dition said those words and pointed forward, the rotating vortex behind Su Ming immediately froze for a brief moment. But it only stopped for an instant before it immediately returned to normal and continued spinning rapidly. Yet at that instant, a freezing glare shone in Dition's eyes. He took a swift step forward, and with that one step, he used the moment the vortex froze and the power of the barren Een within it to arrive before Su Ming. He lifted his right hand and seized the air in Su Ming's direction. You unfilial son, come out. Killing intent shone in Su Ming's eyes. As he retreated, he lifted his right hand and pointed towards Dition's incoming palm. That finger was Su Ming's right index finger. It was a finger that was formed from the strands of hair formed by the power of the god of berserkers. At the instant Su Ming pointed forward, the strands of hair on his finger started burning, and the power that belonged to the first god of berserkers erupted from Su Ming's finger. That power was filled with a domineering air, as if it was the sole ruler of the world. At the instant it descended in the world, even the operations of the gate to the void were disrupted, as if it was about to crumble under that power. This was just the repercussions. If Su Ming had pressed his finger against the gate, then the gate to the void would not have been able to withstand it. At that moment, the one who had to withstand that power was Dition, the presence of the first god of berserkers. A drastic change appeared on Dition's expression, along with an expression of shock that would never appear on his face. Due to the strength of the first god of berserkers, When Su Ming obtained the power of the god of berserkers, all other forms of probing with divine senses were forcefully pushed aside, unless they could see it with their own eyes. Besides, when a statue of the god of berserkers descended, the immortals rarely released their divine senses to cause trouble. Even Tion's projection relied on the old man from the great tribe of freezing sky most of the time due to his intelligence being suppressed. That was why he did not know much about Su Ming obtaining the power of the god of berserkers. The old man from the great tribe of freezing sky might have heard a little about it, but since he did not see it with his own eyes, he did not know much about it. Some of these rumors were about Su Ming, but some were about other people. Not only did they say that he obtained the power of the god, but they also said that his power had increased and he became a powerful berserker in the berserkers. They also said that of things that they, and all of them, and all, and they said, and they and most made, and they said, and. This caused the old man to continue observing Su Ming, even though he regarded this matter with great importance. It also caused Tion's projection to not have much understanding towards this matter. At that moment, when Su Ming pointed forward, the strand of hair on his finger started burning rapidly. Su Ming saw a black hole the size of a fist appearing around his finger. That black hole moved along with his finger, and the instant it appeared, the still sky instantly darkened. That part of the sky was not the only one affected. The entire shaman tribe's sky, the entire land of South Morning Sky, even the Dead Sea, an unknown amount of the sky in an area darkened at that instant. The sky turned dark because all the light had gathered in the black hole around Su Ming's finger with an inconceivable method and speed. It caused the light around Su Ming to reach a piercing degree, as if all the light in the world had been sucked out in an instant. Besides that, the earthen aura on the ground started trembling. It was not just South Morning's continent, but the many continents around it. In fact, it could even be said that all the berserkers' continents floating above the Dead Sea had their earthen aura trembling at that moment, and with the same method and speed as the light in the sky, they appeared in the black hole around Su Ming's finger in the blink of an eye and were swiftly sucked in. The black hole around Su Ming's finger absorbed the light from the sky and the aura from the earth. It contained an entire world, and it pointed towards Tion, whose expression had changed drastically at that moment. The power of a world plane. This is the power of a world plane belonging to the first god of berserkers. Tion's expression changed rapidly, and he swiftly retreated. As he formed a seal with his hands, he pointed towards the sky with his right hand and pointed towards the ground with his left, and a voice that sounded like thunder tumbled out of his mouth. The power of the first god of berserkers. Good. When you were born, I had yet to complete my Tao, and on the day I completed my Tao, you disappeared without a trace. The berserkers believe that you are dead, but I know that you are not dead. You have reached the peak of the first disaster plane, and you cannot move forward anymore. That is why you stepped into the air and searched for other world planes that were affected by the great disaster plane realm. All the worlds in the world form the first disaster plane realm, and you, who have absorbed the essence of all the worlds, who have reached the peak of the world plane realm where we are, I would like to see just how strong you are. Today, your power has appeared. It might only be a hint of it, but I'm also a projection. Let us see just who is the strongest between us. As Tion retreated, he pointed towards different parts of the world with his hands and let out a low roar. White sun soaring. As Tion let out a low roar, he lifted his right hand and pointed it at the sky. Suddenly, an intense white light was emitted from his right hand in this dark world. The white light was so bright that it actually caused the dark sky to turn white. That white was the white of the clouds, and it should be the entire sky. At the same time, with Tion's right hand as the center, an endless amount of white light gathered in the sky where he pointed, and a white sun appeared. That white sun was like a gigantic meteor that was slowly descending from the sky. Right then, only a small part of its body had been revealed, but it was already enough to make the land of the berserkers tremble, the black Dead Sea roar, and the hearts of countless people tremble in fear. From the distance, If anyone in the entire land of South Morning lifted their heads and looked over, they would be able to see the incomparably gigantic white sun that looked like a meteor in the sky. The white light shining from that sun had practically become the most powerful light in the world. This scene made it seem as if the apocalypse had arrived. The sky looked as if it was about to shatter. Cracks appeared on the ground. Due to the Dead Sea tumbling about and roaring, the speed at which the eastern wastelands drifted towards them had increased by several times. If it continued moving at this speed, then it would not only be 10 years before it crashed into the land of South Morning. There was a high possibility that it would be much shorter. Dtion's countenance turned pale. His emperor's robes and crown were burning as well, emitting white flames. His skin was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye, but as he burned and withered, the aura radiating from him grew more and more terrifying. He slowly lifted his left hand that was pointing towards the ground and the right hand that had caused the sun to descend from the sky. The two hands were continuously getting closer to each other, as if they were about to touch each other. His left hand represented the power of ascension, and his right hand represented the sky of day. This process of them continuously getting closer to each other was ascension. As Dtion executed this art, his face instantly turned into that of an old man, and as the mask continued withering away, he looked as if he had turned into a mummy. However, there was a brilliant light in his eyes, and a monstrous fighting spirit had ignited his life. As Su Ming looked at Dtion's unimaginably powerful and unbelievable art, his heart trembled. He suddenly understood that if he did not have the power of the god of berserkers in the gate to the void, then he would still not be able to escape. Hong Luo might be strong, and he might have left this gate behind, but perhaps not even Hong Luo would have expected that Dtion would possess a power that was equivalent to that of the first god of berserkers. He's so powerful. Can I surpass him? Anguish rose in Su Ming's heart. He looked at Dtion. The strand of hair on his right finger was burning rapidly, but compared to Dtion's mighty and shocking divine ability, it seemed as if it was still lacking something. It's missing a soul, and it's missing intelligence. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath and forced down the anguish that had grown in his heart due to Dtion's strength. He mumbled softly, and with a stroke of good fortune, he lifted his right index finger and drew a line in the direction of Dtion with his finger like a brush. Berserker Obliteration. That one line of Berserker Obliteration was drawn with the power of the god of berserkers. At the instant he drew that line, Dtion's pupil shrank. He let out a low growl, and at that instant his hands crashed against each other. When I was born, I did not do anything. When I was born, the berserkers were already in decline. If the heavens are heartless, chaos will descend, and if the earth is heartless, Dark Mountain will die. Su Ming closed his eyes. The blood in his body started boiling, and there was a burning heat in it. If the heavens have eyes, why do they not see me sink into darkness for all eternity? If the gods have spirits, why do they separate me from the rest of the world? If I did not betray the heavens, why did the heavens not let me see the darkness of night? If I did not betray the gods, why did the gods not let my memories of flesh and blood fly everywhere? As Su Ming lifted that line, the strand of hair on his finger started burning, and at that moment, a strange and enchanting light shone from it. That light was different from the previous burning. It was as if the burning this time had an additional soul, an additional hint of intelligence, and an additional will. An even stronger presence erupted forth from the burning strand of hair. It was so strong that it caused the sun in the sky to tremble, and a pair of eyes appeared in the air in the sky. It was a pair of closed eyes. If the heavens have no eyes, then I will use my eyes to seal the heavens. If the gods have spirits, then I swear that I will slay the gods and set up an empire. Su Ming's eyes flew open, and the instant he did so, the gigantic pair of eyes in the sky also flew open. It was also at that moment that Su Ming's Berserker Obliteration sliced through the sky and crashed into Dtion's hands. The light shining from his palms crashed into each other. booming sounds that sounded like two worlds had crashed into each other. The tremors that stirred up made Su Ming's head go off, and he coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. His body was rammed by a huge force and was immediately sent tumbling backwards. He fell behind the gate in the air, which was already unstable and looked as if it could crumble at any moment. His mind instantly became muddled. Before he lost consciousness, he saw Di Tian withstanding the power of his god of berserker obliteration. Di Tian's emperor's robe shattered, his crown shattered, and the sun in the sky melted, turning into white rain that fell on the entire land of South Morning. He also saw Di Tian's body freezing in midair. Blood veins surfaced on his body, and his expression was incredibly strange. He looked as if he was sentimental, as if he had understood something, as if he was melancholic. In the end, he closed his eyes, and his body turned transparent before he gradually disappeared. One of these days, I will surpass Di Tian. Su Ming mumbled bitterly and closed his eyes. End of the scroll. I want recommendation votes. I want monthly votes. I want to keep you as my mistress. I want everything. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 4:37. The second tornado, freezing skies, has ended. The wind blew in freezing skies in the land of South Morning, in the land of the shamans. There was a lot of foreshadowing in this scroll, and it took a lot of effort to write it. Now that I've finished it, I'm quite satisfied with it. The third scroll is famous in Eastern Wastelands. Based on the name of the scroll, it can be seen that the third scroll will be a very exciting one. The clash between Eastern Wastelands and the land of South Morning. I've never seen this sort of connection in any web novel before, and I'm very proud of this method of changing the map. The main character doesn't have to search for a new map, but a new map comes to find him. The second scroll has ended. With the second scroll in hand, I bow to all my fellow Taoists who followed me. Thank you for following me as always. The third scroll will be very exciting, I promise you. Also, I hope that all of you will give me your recommendation votes and monthly votes. I'm not lying at all. Once I finished writing these words, I stood up, and with the help of this screen, I bowed 3 times to all of you to thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 4:38. Cold, just like the feeling in the dream, waves of cold came from outside his body, and he could not open his eyes. It was pitch black, very similar to the feeling in the dream. The surroundings were quiet, so quiet that it was a little scary, and not a single sound could be heard. Other than the cold, other than the darkness, there was nothing. If only her voice appeared and told him that the sky was clear and the clouds were like bunnies. How good would that be? But no, the voice did not appear. The cold became more and more intense, and his body could not move. Waves of pain kept appearing, but slowly. It was as if he had become numb. Am I sleeping? Who is it? Time slowly passed, and he did not know how much time had passed. This was a black seabed without a trace of light. In the depths of the seabed, there were countless huge pieces of ice. Due to the special nature of the seawater, these pieces of ice did not float on the surface. Instead, they quietly sank at the bottom of the seabed. Or rather, this was not the seabed at all, but a glacier. The real seabed was the deepest part of this glacier. That place was unknown to anyone. Above this glacier was the black seawater. Only those who had reached this place would know how high it was. On top of the layers of glacier, there was a protruding iceberg. It was not tall, only about 100 feet tall, and it was completely black. It was unknown whether it was its original color or the color of the seawater. If one were to take a closer look, they would be able to vaguely see that there seemed to be something sealed within the ice mountain. If someone were to stand there and use their powerful divine sense to see through the ice mountain, they would see that there was an oval-shaped vortex that was more than 100 feet wide sealed within the ice mountain. The appearance of this vortex gave people the feeling that it was a door. It was filled with a dark color, and it was sealed inside the iceberg. Beside the door of the vortex was a body that was also sealed in ice. He was not standing, but lying there with his eyes closed like a frozen statue. He was a young man with long hair and a pale face. There was a faint mark of a peach blossom between his eyebrows. He wore a torn robe, and there was a patch of dark red on his knees. That was frozen blood. There was even blood at the corner of this person's mouth, sealed in ice. There were 2 circles of hair on his right index finger and a red ring on his finger. His expression looked bitter, but his sword-like eyebrows gave him a sense of unswerving determination. He just lay there calmly, frozen. One day, in the black ice mountain at the bottom of the sea, cracking sounds could be heard coming from the layer of ice surrounding the young man. However, it did not shatter. However, it was clear that even though the young man was unable to open his eyes, there was a faint life force coming from his body. He was Su Ming. Su Ming had woken up, but he could not open his eyes. He could not move his body. The freezing air had already pierced through his entire body. Where am I? Su Ming closed his eyes, and his divine sense slowly spread out from his body. The instant it touched the layer of ice beside him, he immediately felt a wave of resistance. That resistance was so strong that once Su Ming's divine sense spread out several dozens of feet, it could no longer continue. I'm surrounded by ice, and there's the gate to the void? Doubt rose in Su Ming's heart. He remembered Hong Luo saying that the gate to the void would send him back to his cave abode, but the ice in this place clearly told him that this place was not his cave abode. Could it be that Tion's final white sun soaring crashed against my power of the god of berserkers and stirred up a powerful force that caused some changes to the gate to the void? Su Ming soon thought of the answer. Besides Hong Luo lying, this was the closest answer. However, there is simply no need for Hong Luo to hide this. Su Ming already had an answer in his heart. However, at the same time he became somewhat certain of this answer. A new question appeared in his heart. The gate to the void, why does it still exist? From what I understand, and what Hong Luo meant, it should have disappeared on its own once it sent me out. Yet now, I might not be able to send my divine sense too far away, but I can still clearly sense the gate to the void by my side. Just what is the reason for this? Su Ming thought about it, and after a long while, he forced down his doubts and quietly circulated his cultivation base. This was the first time he had sensed the cultivation in his body since he had woken up. When he had woken up before, because of Tion's existence, because of Hong Luo's words, and because of the scenes in his dream, he had not thought of sensing his cultivation. At that moment, in the silence around him, once he knew that he should be frozen, Su Ming's heart gradually calmed down. At the same time he sensed his cultivation base, some information that seemed to have been forcefully added to his mind appeared in his head. It was Hong Luo's Tao, his divine abilities, his arts, his understanding towards cultivation base, and also his understanding towards the immortals and the entire cultivation system. Su Ming's heart trembled. As he sensed all that information, a huge wave stirred up in his heart. That wave swept through Su Ming's soul, causing him to only regain his senses after a long while. So this is the immortals, 3 steps to heaven's step, fusing with the essence of all worlds to become a solar Kulpa realm. The anguish in Su Ming's heart grew stronger, but at the same time, a wave of determination grew within him. I once said that I would definitely surpass Tion. Even now, my words have not changed. One of these days, no matter what price I have to pay, I will definitely surpass Tion's level of cultivation. At that time, Su Ming's heart slowly calmed down, and he circulated his cultivation base. As time passed by, his flesh and blood gradually became no longer cold. His life force slowly became abundant, and as his body recovered, his divine sense also spread out further, and the strength of the resistance also became weaker. One day, Su Ming's divine sense shot out from the ice mountain with a bang and swept outwards in all directions. In an instant, it covered nearly 10,000 lis in the Black Sea water, and this was because there was also a resistance force within the Black Sea water. Besides that, there was also a mighty pressure that suppressed divine sense, or else Su Ming's divine sense would have been even greater when he spread it out. Once his divine sense spread out 10,000 lis, Su Ming saw the place where he was. He saw the glacier on the ground, himself on the ice mountain, and the gate to the void. He also saw the black seawater. However, his divine sense could not leave the seawater. It was as if compared to the seawater, the area his divine sense covered was just a drop in the ocean. Su Ming opened his eyes. The layer of ice around his body was slowly melting, allowing him to open his eyes, but he still could not move his body. He looked at the black seawater beyond the layer of ice, and a dazed look appeared in his eyes, but it soon disappeared. Could this be the Dead Sea? Su Ming's pupils shrank. He retrieved his divine sense, and, at the same time it covered his body, he spread some of it to the frozen gate to the void. After observing it carefully for a moment, Su Ming found some clues. When the gate to the void was relocated, it was disturbed by the power of my battle against Di Tian, causing the relocation to deviate, and I was sent to the ice under the Dead Sea. But due to the external force and the ice sealing it, it did not disappear. Instead, it looked as if it had gained physical form and was preserved. If that's the case, if it can still operate, then could it continue relocation and send me back to my cave abode in the mountain range? A pensive look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The power of his berserker bones erupted from his body and spread outwards. Cracking sounds rang out, and the layer of ice around him immediately started cracking. However, it only cracked, and he was still far from being able to escape. Su Ming frowned and closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them. This time, at the instant he did so, a profound look filled his eyes, and a brilliant light shone in them. The small humanoid that looked exactly like him sitting in his Dantian region also opened its eyes. With a bang, the ice around Su Ming's body trembled once again due to a power that was different from the power of the berserkers bursting forth from his body. It no longer shattered, but cracks started spreading through the ice. These two different powers formed two different transformations. Su Ming's eyes sparkled, and he gained a new understanding towards his current level of cultivation. The power of the Berserker tribe is strong and fierce. That's why it can shatter the ice. The power of the Immortals is long and gentle. That's why cracks spread out. As Su Ming's level of cultivation went through multiple transformations, the layer of ice around him shattered with a bang several days later, causing his body to finally regain mobility. However, only the interior of the ice shattered. The outer layer remained, as if it had turned into a gigantic shell. The ice around it was rapidly growing, and before long, it would turn into a frozen mountain once again. Based on the Tao of inheritance Hong Luo gave me, the small humanoid in my body is known as a nascent soul, and the power that belongs to the immortals in my body is known as the nascent soul realm. But the nascent soul realm doesn't seem to be very strong. It can't compare to Di Tian at all, but Hong Luo used his powerful divine sense to allow this body to bring out most of his divine abilities. By the looks of it, divine sense is the immortal's true focus. Hong Luo might have died, but he still left behind a large number of divine abilities and arts in the Tao of inheritance. It's a pity that all of them require a powerful divine sense to cast. But there are also some arts that can be used by those in the nascent soul realm, such as a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he took a swift step forward. His body disappeared in an instant, and when he reappeared, he was already several dozens of feet away. Even if it was only several dozens of feet and Su Ming could reach this sort of speed before, he had relied on his speed, and right now, he did not use any of the power of the Berserker tribe. He only used the Immortal's divine abilities. A short instant, Su Ming mumbled softly. As he pondered over it, he instinctively spread his divine sense outwards once again. This time, he did not go to check the black seawater beyond the ice mountain, but swept his divine sense across the glacier. Suddenly, his expression changed. Within the area of his divine sense, he saw an innumerable amount of living creatures sealed within and beyond the endless glacier. Almost every few meters, there was an object sealed in ice. Recommendation votes. Monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 439. In the land of the shamans and the land of South Morning was a remote region where White Bull Tribe and Black Crane Tribe were located. During this period of time, something happened that caused great terror to White Bull Tribe and Black Crane Tribe. The panic in White Bull Tribe was because of Su Ming. He might have left that day, but the patriarch of White Bull Tribe's actions had stirred up the resentment in the hearts of his tribe members. Most of the tribe members believed that it was a great humiliation to give away the women of their tribe so that an outsider could vent his lust on them. They would rather fight and kill than let this happen. Besides, to many people, if they fought together, it was not impossible for them to kill Su Ming. That was why they began to question their patriarch's actions at that time. Even though nothing had truly happened, the resentment and doubts were like seeds that had been planted in their hearts. This was something the monkey-faced old man from White Bull Tribe knew about, but he could only remain silent. This was different from the cruel control the other tribes had over their tribe. The old man was attached to his tribe from the bottom of his heart. Fortunately, this kind of resentment and doubt only existed for half a month. Following the incident that caused the entire White Bull Tribe to panic, it gradually dissipated a little. The cause of this incident was a member of White Bull Tribe venturing out alone. He was a young man who still had the hot-bloodedness and impulsiveness of his age. He was also the partner of 2 of the 3 women who had been sent out. He went to Su Ming's cave abode alone, but when he arrived, he discovered to his shock that the mountain range had disappeared. Everything was gone. The place where the mountain range used to be had turned into a flat plain. There was not a single trace of destruction in the area, as if there had never been a mountain in the first place. When he returned to the tribe, and this matter was made known to the entire White Bull Tribe, the monkey-faced old man personally brought some people to Su Ming's cave abode. Once he examined it carefully, confusion also appeared on the old man's face, but there was even more fear towards the unknown on his face. Not only was the mountain range gone, even their shaman crystal mine was gone. The monkey-faced old man stared at the empty land, and for some unknown reason, he suddenly felt fearful. It was as if there was a faint, murderous aura in the calm land, causing his heart to tremble. He immediately brought his tribesmen back to the tribe, and with his status as the patriarch of the tribe, he placed a gag on all his tribesmen, forbidding them from talking about this matter. All those who disobeyed would be severely punished. He had a vague feeling that the strange phenomenon that had happened in the land of the shamans over the past few days, especially the gigantic white sun that had appeared in the sky that day, seemed to have some sort of strange connection with this place. He did not have any proof of this. It was just a feeling. Compared to White Bull Tribe, Black Crane Tribe had also sunk into fear, but their fear was slightly different from White Bull Tribe's. Their tribe leader had gone missing, and Madame G had never returned. All of these things made it clear that the person who occupied the shaman crystal mine was definitely not someone to be trifled with. In fact, the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe had even brought some people to this place to investigate, but what he saw was the same as what the people from White Bull Tribe had seen. This place was empty, and it was completely different from what he remembered. The faintly discernible murderous aura that existed in this place also made the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe's heart tremble. He quickly left and informed his tribe members to turn this place into a forbidden ground. Due to the disappearance of the shaman crystal mine, Black Crane Tribe and White Bull Tribe no longer had any reason to fight against each other. Time trickled by. A month later, a fiery red ape charged towards this place from the distance. It was momentarily stunned when it saw the empty land. Then it circled around the place and searched for it. Eventually, it found that this place was empty. The mountain range where the cave abode once stood was gone, and the only person who was friendly to it in the past had also disappeared. However, it did not give up. Instead, it stayed in the area and would occasionally return to this place to investigate, trying to find the entrance to this place. No one in this place knew that in truth, the mountain range did not disappear. It was still there, but Hong Luo had cast his divine ability and hidden it away, causing no one to be able to see it, sense it, or touch it. It was as if this place had turned into a dimension that was isolated from the world. There were 2 corpses on the ground outside the mountain range. In truth, more accurately speaking, there should have been 3 corpses. However, Madame G's corpse had already been reduced to pieces, and the outline of her body could no longer be seen. One of the remaining 2 corpses was Madame G's puppet, which was also her husband, Ji and Hai. The other was the dried-up corpse of the tribe leader of Black Crane Tribe. There were also a large number of black beetles on the ground. These beetles were lying on the ground and did not move, but there were no signs of death on their bodies. It was as if they were in deep sleep. The only thing that could fly around in circles in this place was a black line. It was Su Ming's strange little snake. That snake was flying back and forth in the area and would occasionally let out hissing sounds, as if it was searching for something, but it could not find it. Eventually, it flew to a small virescent sword lying in the grass not too far away and lay down there. Occasionally, it would let out hissing sounds, as if it was calling out to something. Within the cave abode in the mountain range was a gigantic medicinal cauldron. The power of the world was still surging into the cauldron, causing the medicine in the cauldron to be slowly refined. In another stone chamber was the old berserker. His body did not move, but his eyelids were trembling, as if he was struggling to open his eyes and wake up. Yet the moment he gathered all his strength and was about to open his eyes, the small snake on the grass outside the cave abode lifted its head and hissed. It stared at its master's cave abode. Then, with a swift move, it slithered through the grass and immediately flew up. When it flew up, 3 spirit plunders were brought up by it and charged towards the cave abode. It shot through the air and appeared in the stone chamber where the old berserker's body was stored. The small snake let out a piercing hiss, and with a flick of its body, the 3 spirit plunders instantly flew into the old berserker's head and floated there based on their original trajectory. The instant the spirit plunders floated in the air, the old berserker struggled to open his tightly shut eyes by a slit, and a low growl that sounded like that of a wild beast tumbled out of his mouth. The small snake was above the old berserker. At the same time it hissed, a chilling glare appeared in its eyes. With a swift move, it charged towards the old berserker and bit down on his arm. Instantly, a wave of black smoke spread out from the old berserker's arm and covered his entire body. The old berserker let out a low growl, unwilling to admit defeat, and closed his eyes once again. The small snake observed him by the side for a moment before flying out of the cave abode once again. It arrived beside the small virescent sword and lifted its head to look at it. Occasionally, hisses that called out to it would echo in the air. This was its home. That was how it felt. Everything in this place had to remain the way it was and wait for its master's return. Before its master returned, it would protect this place for all eternity. Besides, in the entire land of South Morning, as long as their divine sense did not surpass Hong Luo's, then no one would be able to discover the existence of this mountain range. And in the land of South Morning, there was practically no one whose divine sense could surpass Hong Luo's. As for Di Tian, he had already disappeared. Hong Luo might have died, but his seal was still around. It might slowly weaken, but it would still take several hundreds of years before it completely disappeared. Time passed by once again. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed since Su Ming left. During this half a year, White Bull Tribe and Black Crane Tribe mostly stopped paying attention to the mountain range that had disappeared. Peace returned to their tribe, and there were practically no more fights between the 2 tribes. Instead, during this half a year, they started preparing to migrate. If a small tribe like theirs migrated alone, it would be difficult for them not to run into danger in the vast land of the shamans. That was why even if they migrated, they would wait for the bigger tribes that were migrating to pass by this place and join them. They might lose some of their people, but this was the only way for more of their tribe members to survive. On this day, half a year later, late at night, a powerful ray of light suddenly appeared in the dark night sky. That light only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. It might have caught quite a number of people's attention, but when they took a closer look, the light had already disappeared without a trace. At the same time the light appeared, The small snake lifted its head swiftly at the spot where the cave abode had disappeared from the center of white bull tribe and black crane tribe. Its eyes were shining with wariness, and its forked tongue flicked continuously as it stared at the empty ground several thousands of feet away from it. There was a ball of dark light there. The moment that ball of light appeared, a powerful pressure spread out from it, causing the grass on the ground to bend, as if a huge gust of wind had been stirred up out of nowhere. A large amount of freezing air also spread out from that ball of dark light. That freezing air fused with the wind, causing the ground around the area to freeze in an instant, and the chill gradually spread outwards. The small snake did not make a single sound. It lay down on the grass and stared at the ball of dark light coldly. This was its master's cave abode. Now that its master had left, if there were any outsiders who trespassed into the cave, it would definitely protect it. In truth, that was what it had been doing during the past half a year. Almost once every few days, it would bite the old berserker so that he would remain weak, but not die. It remembered that this was the task its master had given to the monkey, but now that the monkey was no longer around, it had taken over. At that moment, the small snake's gaze turned colder. It was waiting, observing just what sort of creature that ball of dark light was. Time trickled by, and after the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the ball of light shone and its shape changed. It gradually turned from a circle to an oval, and the pressure spreading out from it became even stronger. At the same time, fine cracks appeared on its surface. At the instant faint cracking sounds rang out, a figure walked out from the oval circle of light. At the instant this figure walked out, the freezing aura instantly became several times thicker, causing the area to turn into a frigid place. The small snake moved swiftly and charged forward without a single sound. Its eyes sparkled and it bared its poisonous fangs. Just as it was about to bite down, the killing intent in its eyes suddenly disappeared and was replaced by pleasant surprise. It put away its poisonous fangs and let out a joyful hiss before charging towards the person. That person was Su Ming. His face was filled with excitement. As he lifted his right hand, the small snake flew into his palm and started hissing at Su Ming in pleasant surprise. At the same time, the ground under Su Ming's feet seemed to contain an unimaginable amount of freezing air due to his appearance. As it spread to the ground, it immediately covered the ground with a thin layer of ice. Begging for a push, begging for the moon, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 440. Di Tian's projected clone should have disappeared under the power of the god of berserkers. But the projection of a clone is already so powerful. If he sent another clone here, or if his real body came here. Su Ming sat down cross-legged in his cave abode and remembered what had happened half a year ago. His expression turned dark. But why am I so important to him with his great power? Perhaps it's more accurate to say just what sort of secret is hidden in my body, or rather, in Di Tian's heart? Su Ming had thought about this question for a long time, but he still could not find a complete answer. Fei, air, Su Ming whispered softly. When he said those two words, he did not feel grief in his mind, but his heart and body could not help but grieve. Su Ming closed his eyes. When he opened them after a long while, there was grief in his eyes. Perhaps the greatest sorrow in the world is that you don't know why you're grieving. Su Ming mumbled softly to himself in anguish. He remembered the woman's stone statue in the coffin. He also understood that everything in his dream might have been real, but he, who still lacked most of his memories, found it difficult to understand the grief in his body and heart. Without memories that are carved into my bones, even the most familiar people will become strangers to me. But I can't wipe away the memories of my body. The pain in my heart reminds me of the existence of grief, but my mind is calm, as if my body and soul have been separated. Just what is this destiny? Just what is Di Tian thinking? Just who am I? Now that I think about it, is everything in Dark Mountain really an illusion? Why did the elder name me Su Ming? Destiny, destiny. Once I control my own fate, who can still call me destiny? Su Ming lifted his head. His gaze seemed to be able to see through the cave abode and see the sky beyond the seal. After a long while, Su Ming closed his eyes and formed a seal with his hands. The nascent soul in his body moved along with him and executed the divine ability to create puppets. As for the material, it was the old berserker. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, a month went by. During this month, the small snake continued observing the area vigilantly, carrying out Su Ming's orders with his divine thought and protecting him. On this day, the power of the world in Su Ming's cave abode suddenly started tumbling about, as if it had turned into a vortex that absorbed all the power of the world in the area. Even the mountain range started rumbling, and this lasted for most of the day. Then, two people walked out of the cave abode. The person in the lead was Su Ming. His face was aloof, and he was dressed in black robes. Behind him was the old berserker with a dull look in his eyes. His entire body was pitch black, and there was a ghastly presence spreading out from him as he followed behind Su Ming. Su Ming stopped outside the cave abode and turned his head around to cast a glance at the old berserker behind him. A faint glint appeared in his eyes, and he lifted his right hand to form a seal before pointing forward. Immediately, a dark light appeared in the old man's eyes. He took a step forward and hurled his fist towards the sky. With that punch, an intense rumble and a large area of ripples appeared in the sky. There was also a black fog that spread out along with his punch, enveloping an area of 70 to 80 feet. Not far away, the small snake lifted its head and stared at the black fog. There was doubt in its eyes. The old berserker stood in midair, unmoving. Su Ming stared at the old man, shook his head, and sighed. This person might only be in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm, but I don't know what sort of divine ability he's practiced. His body is incredibly sturdy, and his soul can split into several parts to hide in his body. With the immortal's art of creating puppets, they can only refine 2 of his souls and 4 of his physical forms. It's still difficult to find a place to hide 1 of his souls and 3 of his physical forms, or else I would be able to control him and have him cast the divine abilities of the berserker soul realm instead of just relying on his physical power. However, this was still fine. According to the 10,000 poison corpse transformation art that Hong Luo had inherited, what was refined was a poison corpse, and there was no need for any divine abilities. It only needed a strong physical body, because the poison within its body was the best divine ability. I might only be able to refine half of it, but some of the snake's poison is still in his body. That poison is incredibly domineering, and I can use it temporarily. If I run into any other poisonous creatures in the future, I can let this poison corpse absorb it and slowly refine it into a real poison corpse. I'm afraid that just this poison corpse alone won't be able to blast open that block of ice. We need to make more preparations. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence. Once he sent a thought to the poison corpse, he no longer bothered with it and returned to his cave abode to isolate himself once again. The poison corpse fell from the sky. His entire body was black, and a dull look appeared in his eyes once again. He stood outside the cave abode, unmoving. The small snake in the sky flew over in a flash, puzzled. It crawled down on the poison corpse's head and hissed, looking incredibly comfortable. Time passed by once again. Su Ming had been continuously trying to refine Ji Yunhai's corpse in his cave abode, but every single time he sent his divine sense into Ji Yunhai's corpse, he would not be able to keep it in his body, and he could not find a place to place his brand. Ji Yunhai's body was empty. In fact, even his organs were gone. His entire body was like a shell, and Su Ming could not understand just how Madame Ji managed to control this puppet. He tried a lot of methods, but in the end, Su Ming was still at his wit's end. He looked at Ji Yunhai's corpse and frowned as he thought about it for a long time, but in the end, he could only shake his head and sigh. Soul catchers are very mysterious, and Madame Ji's puppet is different from the young soul catcher's puppet I met in the past. Just how did she manage to control this puppet? This is clearly an empty shell. Su Ming frowned, and suddenly, a focused look appeared on his face. He looked towards Ji Yunhai's corpse, and a bright light gradually appeared in his eyes. Empty shell. Empty shell. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. After a moment of pensive silence, he closed his eyes and formed a seal with his hands before he tapped a few spots on his body. Immediately, his presence changed, and the small nascent soul in his body opened its eyes. There was a sparkle in those eyes, and it was naturally Su Ming. The small nascent soul moved and crawled out of the top of Su Ming's skull. Once it floated above his head, its body became a little indistinct, as if it would disappear with just a gust of wind. It shuddered, and surprise as well as a dazed look appeared in the small nascent soul's eyes. The nascent soul is the soul of cultivation. The body is just the shell, and the nascent soul is the foundation. To a cultivator, once their nascent soul or nascent divinity is taken away, then it's the same as death. If it's the other way around, then the physical body is secondary. Su Ming's voice tumbled out of the small nascent soul's mouth, and with a single move, it charged towards Ji Yunhai's corpse and disappeared without a trace. A moment later, Ji Yunhai's eyes suddenly opened. His eyes were completely gray. However, there was a dim glow flashing deep within the gray. Ji Yunhai slowly sat up and lowered his head to check his body. A moment later, a smile was revealed on the corner of his mouth. Not bad. So this is how I use this puppet. It must be different from Madame G's method. At the same time, Su Ming also opened his eyes. Once he met Ji Yunhai's gaze, a smile appeared on his face, but there was also a strange look on his face. Su Ming looked at Ji Yunhai, and he had a feeling as if he had been split into two. One of them was gathered in Ji Yunhai's body with his power as an immortal, and the other was his true self, looking at Ji Yunhai, who was being controlled by him in a manner similar to possession. Su Ming smiled. Ji Yunhai, who was being controlled by his nascent soul, also smiled. With one move, buzzing sounds immediately came from another stone chamber, and a large swarm of black beetles woke up at that moment and rushed over. Su Ming's pupil shrank, but he did not move. Even Ji Yunhai, who was being controlled by his nascent soul, did not move. He simply allowed the beetles to come to him. Once they covered his entire body, Ji Yunhai looked as if he had turned into another person. If no one looked closely, they would not be able to tell that his flesh and blood were actually formed by these black beetles. If that's the case, then this can also be considered as one of my clones. Su Ming felt his spirit rise. He had seen Tion's projection before, and now that he also possessed this strange clone, it allowed Su Ming to gain a greater understanding towards the immortal's divine abilities. Su Ming was already sitting down cross-legged. With a single thought, a hint of a smile immediately appeared on his clone's black face. He turned around and walked out of his cave abode. As he watched his clone leave, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and with a flip of his palm, a crystal the size of a fist appeared on his palm. It was the wind crystal of berserkers. As he stared at this item, a strange look appeared on Su Ming's face. He had tried everything he could think of, but it was still difficult for him to fuse with this item. However, the battle against Madame G that day had allowed him to gain a hint of inspiration through Madame G's divine ability when he fought against her. However, he had lost his consciousness after that. Only when he returned to his cave abode did he calm down and think about whether that hint of inspiration at that time could work. It doesn't matter whether it's the power of the god of berserkers, Han Mountain Bell, or even my power as an immortal. They're all external powers to me. I can't rely on them too much. Only my own power as a berserker can make me stronger. Su Ming stared at the wind crystal of berserkers, and an indescribable light shone in his eyes. This method might actually work. Su Ming gritted his teeth. At that moment, his clone walked out of his cave abode under the control of his nascent soul. The instant he did so, the small snake lying on the poisoned corpse's head immediately looked towards Su Ming's clone with a puzzled look on its face. Su Ming's clone smiled faintly and swung his right hand at the ground. Immediately, the tribe leader of Black Crane flew towards him and was swept up by him. With one move, He rose into the air and turned into a long arc that charged into the distance. When he approached the spot where Hong Luo had placed the seal, Su Ming's clone lifted his right hand and formed a seal before pointing at the air. Immediately, ripples appeared before him, and Su Ming's clone walked into those ripples and disappeared without trace. When he reappeared, Su Ming's clone was standing in midair. When he lowered his head to look down, he could no longer see the mountain range beneath him, only empty space. Not too far away was a fire-red ape squatting there and staring at him with a dumbfounded expression. When he saw the fire ape, Su Ming's clone let out a boisterous laugh. His face was filled with delight, and he lifted his right hand to point at the fire ape. Immediately, ripples appeared in the air before the ape, revealing the entrance to the mountain range. The fire ape was momentarily stunned before it immediately crawled inside, and the entrance disappeared. The smile on Su Ming's clone's lips gradually disappeared, replaced by a cold and dark look. He looked in the direction of Black Crane Tribe, and with one move, he charged towards it. 2 hours later, the surprise arrived. Please recommend me. Please give me monthly votes. Chapter 441. Su Ming lifted his left hand and pushed at the vortex gate behind him through the air. Immediately, a large amount of freezing air spilled out from Su Ming's body and enveloped the gate. Cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and the gate to the void immediately turned into a gigantic block of ice. Once he was done, Su Ming let out a boisterous laugh and looked at the small snake on his palm. It might have only been half a year since he last saw it, but to Su Ming, he had gone through a lot during that time. It felt as if a long time had passed since he left the cave abode he created and returned. The small snake hissed in Su Ming's palm and hissed. Its chilling eyes were now replaced by joy, and it lowered its head to rub against Su Ming's palm a few times. Its body was too small and was only the thickness of a finger. Now that it was acting this way, it looked incredibly cute. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. He might have returned to his cave abode, but the freezing aura in his body had yet to completely disappear. At that moment, as it spread through his feet and spread to the ground within a circular area of several thousands of feet around Su Ming was instantly covered in frost. Wisps of white smoke spread out and floated into midair, causing the temperature in the area to instantly drop by half. That was not all. A large amount of water droplets appeared on Su Ming's body. These water droplets seeped out from his skin and looked like sweat. But in truth, Su Ming knew that this was the freezing air in his body. A glint appeared in his eyes, and all the pores on his body immediately closed up. The instant he did so, the freezing air spreading out from his body calmed down, but there were still wisps of it spreading out weakly. I can't let all the freezing air in my body go out, or else my body might need a long time to get used to it if I return to the glacier at the bottom of the Dead Sea. Su Ming thought in his heart and lifted the small snake with his right hand. Once he placed it on his shoulder, the small snake immediately flew out and landed on his shoulder. It crawled down and looked as if it was doing nothing but laziness. As he looked at the familiar cave abode around him, the excitement in Su Ming's eyes slowly disappeared. When his gaze fell on the two corpses on the ground, a freezing glare appeared in his eyes. Ji Yinhai. Su Ming looked at the dried-up and thin corpse and could not help but remember the scenes of him fighting against Madame Ji that day. He walked slowly towards Ji Yunhai's corpse. Su Ming crouched down and placed his hand on Ji Yunhai's corpse. After observing it closely for a moment, a pensive look appeared in his eyes, and he lowered his head to look at the large number of black beetles that were not dead, but just sleeping beside Ji Yunhai's corpse. The strength of these insects had left an incredibly deep impression on Su Ming that day. I don't know how many years it has been since Ji Yunhai died, but he was turned into a puppet by Madame Ji. Now that Madame Ji is dead, if I can control this puppet, it will be able to help me gain something in that glacier. Su Ming lifted two of his fingers and picked up one of the black beetles on the ground. He placed it before his eyes and scrutinized it for a while. This insect isn't a puppet. How did Madame Ji control it? Su Ming stared at the insect, and after a long while, his eyes suddenly lit up and he looked towards Ji Yunhai's corpse. Could it be that these insects aren't controlled by Madame Ji, but by Ji Yunhai? Even if Ji Yunhai has turned into a puppet, these insects are still affected by his instincts. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at the red ring on his right hand. His eyes sparkled, and after a moment, he stood up and started pacing around the mountain range with a frown on his face. Occasionally, a pensive look would appear on his face, and, at other times, delight would appear on his face, but eventually his expression would change, as if there was something that was hard for him to make a decision on. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt, and he turned his head sideways to look at the oval-shaped vortex that had brought him back to this place, which was also known as the Gate to the Void. That gate floated there quietly. It was covered in ice and had already turned into a gigantic block of ice. I might not know how long I was unconscious, but judging by the changes in this mountain range, it shouldn't have been more than a year if I add all the time together. And it's been about 3 months since I woke up in the glacier. Su Ming remembered his experiences during the past 3 months when he was at the bottom of the suspected Dead Sea in the Black Glacier world. He had used half a month's time to walk out of the glacier for the first time, but the instant he did so, he immediately found it difficult to move even an inch forward due to the pressure from the black seawater. He had used 1.5 months' time to get used to the pressure from the seawater. He could now move about 1,000 feet forward, and with each step he took, if he did not lift his foot quickly, then his feet would immediately be frozen by the glacier. This made it difficult for him to stop moving on the glacier. He had to constantly be moving quickly. 800-something feet away from the block of ice he was on was the one closest to him among the countless living beings sealed in the glacier when he used his divine sense to check the area. It was a ferocious-looking man covered in green scales. That man was 60 feet tall, and his muscles were swollen, as if they contained an astonishing amount of power. He had his left hand clenched into a fist, and in his right hand was a gigantic club. Su Ming had no idea what that club was made of. It was entirely black, and there were 9 sharp teeth sticking out of it. Not only did it give off a barbaric air, it also made Su Ming's heart palpitate. That gigantic spiked club was clearly a treasure. Su Ming had checked the ice for several days, and once he was certain that the frozen man no longer had any signs of life, he used half a month to try all sorts of methods to break the ice. But in the end, he could only break a few inches of ice, and once he stopped, the ice would automatically close up. With his level of cultivation, breaking a few inches was already his limit. Su Ming was also puzzled by this. After all, he could break the ice where he was, but why did he have to spend so much effort to break the layer of ice where the man was? As Su Ming pondered about this, he also found an answer. That answer was the time that the man was sealed in ice. Based on the characteristic of being sealed in ice when he stepped on the glacier, it was clear that the ice where Su Ming was had not been sealed for a long time, which was why he could break it. However, the ice where the man was had existed for an unknown amount of time. If Su Ming wanted to break the layer of ice where the man was, he would need to possess even greater power. After some hesitation, Su Ming used half a month to dig out the gate to the void from the ice. Once he studied it for a while, he went through the gate and returned to his cave abode in the mountain range. Su Ming stared at the gate to the void and frowned. Based on the immortal system, I'm currently in the initial stage of the nascent soul realm. I might not know what sort of realm the nascent soul realm cultivators are in compared to the berserkers here, but I can sense that their power is about the same as my current power. It's just that the immortal's power can last a long time, and they're skilled in divine abilities. If that's the case, then I can make some deductions. Su Ming averted his gaze from the gate to the void and started thinking. The initial stage of the nascent soul realm is equivalent to the 4 berserker bones I have right now. If I'm in the middle stage, I should have more than 10 berserker bones? If this guess could be verified, then the later stage of the nascent soul realm would be equivalent to 20-something pieces, and the immortal soul formation realm would be equivalent to the initial stage of the berserker soul realm. That should be the case. Immortals needed epiphanies to form their nascent divinity, And if they could form their own nascent divinity, they would be an existence that surpassed the nascent soul realm. As for the berserkers, once they stepped into the berserker soul realm, they could form their own statue of the god of berserkers. In comparison, one was the nascent divinity in their bodies, and the other was the statue of the god of berserkers outside their bodies. There were similarities. As for soul transformation, which was above the immortal soul formation, that was the middle stage of the berserker soul realm. And in the immortal's cultivation system, the peak of the first step, ascension, should be the later stage of the berserker god realm. Illusory yin realm and corporeal yang realm existed between the first and second steps in the immortal's cultivation system. Based on that, illusory yin realm and corporeal yang realm was the completed great completion in the berserker soul realm. If they could break through it, it would be the same as truly stepping into the second step in the immortal's cultivation system. It's a pity that the berserker's cultivation system was cut off after we reached the berserker soul realm, but I believe that the berserkers must have a realm that is similar to the immortal's second step. Su-Ming closed his eyes, and after a long while, he opened them. Now, I can be considered to be practicing both the immortal and berserker path, but it's a pity that I can't fuse these two powers together. When I cast the immortal's arts, the power of the berserkers will fall silent, and when I use the power of berserker bones, I won't be able to cast the immortal's divine abilities. Besides having my divine sense return to normal, it's difficult for me to cast any other abilities. But even so, if I use them alternately, my current combat abilities will be much stronger than half a year ago. Su-Ming clenched his fists. Once he swept his gaze across the ground, his eyes fell on the dried-up corpse of the tribe leader of Black Crane tribe lying on the ground. He walked over slowly and looked at the corpse coldly, eventually fixing his eyes on the person's right leg. There were clear signs that the injury had not healed, and there was also a gigantic dead centipede there. This person is the one I injured from Black Crane tribe. A chilling glare appeared in Su-Ming's eyes. He had been a little puzzled all those years ago. Madame G's arrival and the obvious killing intent was clearly directed at him. White Bull tribe and Black Crane tribe were both suspects, but in his heart, Su-Ming was even more suspicious of Black Crane tribe. When he saw the tribe leader's corpse, a cold sneer appeared on his lips. Madame G's appearance had caused Su-Ming to go through a lot of things during the past half a year. Some of them were good, and some were bad, but there was no way Su-Ming would let go of Black Crane tribe, who had ordered Madame G to come to him. Su-Ming's expression was cold. With a wave of his arm, he swept up Ji Yunhai's corpse and the sleeping black beetles, along with the small virescent sword that was flying towards him on its own and letting out a whistling sound, and returned to his cave abode in the mountain range. Once he returned to his cave abode, Su-Ming immediately went to the stone chamber where the medicinal cauldron was. When he saw that everything was normal, he relaxed and went to the stone chamber where the old berserker was. When he saw that the old man was completely black and covered in bite marks, Su-Ming was momentarily stunned. The small snake on his shoulder immediately lifted its head, and there was a smug look on its face, as if it was waiting to be praised. Su-Ming smiled. Once he swept his gaze past the old berserker, a strange light appeared in his eyes. I'm not a soul catcher. It's very difficult for me to create a soul catcher's puppet, but with my current power as an immortal, there are a few divine abilities that nascent soul cultivators can cast from Hong Luo's legacy. Su-Ming stroked his chin and sent a thought to the small snake on his shoulder. The small snake immediately flew out and charged out of the cave abode. It floated in midair and looked around warily to protect Su-Ming. There will be a surprise at night. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 442. Di Tian's projected clone should have disappeared under the power of the god of berserkers. But the projection of a clone is already so powerful. If he sent another clone here, or if his real body came here. Su-Ming sat down cross-legged in his cave abode and remembered what had happened half a year ago. His expression turned dark. But why am I so important to him with his great power? Perhaps it's more accurate to say Just what sort of secret is hidden in my body, or rather, in Di Tian's heart? Su Ming had thought about this question for a long time, but he still could not find a complete answer. Fei, air, Su Ming whispered softly. When he said those two words, he did not feel grief in his mind, but his heart and body could not help but grieve. Su Ming closed his eyes. When he opened them after a long while, there was grief in his eyes. Perhaps the greatest sorrow in the world is that you don't know why you're sad. Su Ming mumbled softly to himself in anguish. He remembered the stone statue of the woman in the coffin. He also understood that everything in his dream might have been real, but he, who still lacked most of his memories, found it difficult to understand the grief in his body and heart. Without memories that are carved into my bones, even the most familiar people will become strangers to me. But I can't wipe away my body's memories. The pain in my heart reminds me of the existence of grief, but my mind is calm, as if my body and soul have been separated. Just what is this destiny? Just what is Di Tian thinking? Just who am I? Now that I think about it, is everything in Dark Mountain really an illusion? Why did the elder name me Su Ming? Destiny, destiny. Once I control my own fate, who can still call me destiny? Su Ming lifted his head. His gaze seemed to be able to see through the cave abode and see the sky beyond the seal. After a long while, Su Ming closed his eyes and formed a seal with his hands. The nascent soul in his body moved along with him and executed the divine ability to create puppets. As for the material, it was the old berserker. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, a month went by. During this month, the small snake continued observing the area vigilantly, carrying out Su Ming's orders with his divine thought and protecting him. On this day, the power of the world in Su Ming's cave abode suddenly started tumbling about, as if it had turned into a vortex that absorbed all the power of the world in the area. Even a mountain range started rumbling, and this lasted for most of the day. Then, two people walked out of the cave abode. The person in the lead was Su Ming. His face was aloof, and he was dressed in black robes. Behind him was the old berserker, with a dull look in his eyes. His entire body was pitch black, and there was a ghastly presence spreading out from him as he followed behind Su Ming. Su Ming stopped outside the cave abode and turned his head around to cast a glance at the old berserker behind him. A faint glint appeared in his eyes, and he lifted his right hand to form a seal before pointing forward. Immediately, a dark light appeared in the old man's eyes. He took a step forward and hurled his fist toward the sky. With that punch, an intense rumble and a large area of ripples appeared in the sky. There was also a black fog that spread out along with his punch, enveloping an area of 70 to 80 feet. Not far away, the small snake lifted its head and stared at the black fog. There was doubt in its eyes. The old berserker stood in midair, unmoving. Su Ming stared at the old man, shook his head, and sighed. This person might only be in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm, but I don't know what sort of divine ability he's practiced. His body is incredibly sturdy, and his soul can split into several parts to hide in his body. With the immortal's art of creating puppets, they can only refine 2 of his souls and 4 of his physical forms. It's still difficult to find a place to hide 1 of his souls and 3 of his physical forms. Or else I would be able to control him and have him cast the divine abilities of the Berserker Soul realm instead of just relying on his physical power. However, this was still fine. According to the 10,000 poison corpse transformation art that Hong Luo had inherited, what was refined was a poison corpse, and there was no need for any divine abilities. It only needed a strong physical body, because the poison within its body was the best divine ability. I might only be able to refine half of it, but some of the snake's poison is still in his body. That poison is incredibly domineering, and I can use it temporarily. If I run into any other poisonous creatures in the future, I can let this poison corpse absorb it and slowly refine it into a real poison corpse. I'm afraid that just this poison corpse alone won't be able to blast open that block of ice. We need to make more preparations. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence. Once he sent a thought to the poison corpse, he no longer bothered with it and returned to his cave abode to isolate himself once again. The poisoned corpse fell from the sky. His entire body was black, and a dull look appeared in his eyes once again. He stood outside the cave abode, unmoving. The small snake in the sky flew towards him in a flash, puzzled. It crawled down on the poisoned corpse's head and hissed, looking incredibly comfortable. Time passed by once again. Su Ming had been continuously trying to refine Ji Yunhai's corpse in his cave abode, but every single time he sent his divine sense into Ji Yunhai's corpse, he would not be able to keep it in his body. He could not find a place to place his brand. Ji Yunhai's body was empty. In fact, even his organs were gone. His entire body was like a shell, and Su Ming could not understand just how Madame Ji managed to control this puppet. He tried a lot of methods, but in the end, Su Ming was still at his wit's end. He looked at Ji Yunhai's corpse and frowned as he thought about it for a long time. But in the end, he could only shake his head and sigh. Soul catchers are very mysterious, and Madame Ji's puppet is different from the young soul catcher's puppet I met in the past. Just how did she manage to control this puppet? This is clearly an empty shell. Su Ming frowned. Suddenly, a focused look appeared on his face, and he looked towards Ji Yunhai's corpse. A brilliant light gradually appeared in his eyes. Empty shell, empty shell. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. After a moment of pensive silence, he closed his eyes and formed a seal with both hands before he tapped a few spots on his body. Immediately, his presence changed, and the small nascent soul in his body opened its eyes. There was a sparkle in those eyes, and it was naturally Su Ming. The small nascent soul moved and crawled out of the top of Su Ming's skull. Once it floated above his head, its body became a little indistinct, as if it would disappear with just a gust of wind. It shuddered, and surprise as well as a dazed look appeared in the small nascent soul's eyes. The nascent soul is the soul of cultivation. The body is just the shell. The nascent soul is the foundation. To a cultivator, once their nascent soul or nascent divinity is taken away, then it's the same as death. If it's the other way around, then the physical body is secondary. Su Ming's voice tumbled out of the small nascent soul's mouth, and with a single move, it charged towards Ji Yunhai's corpse and disappeared without a trace. A moment later, Ji Yunhai's eyes suddenly opened. His eyes were completely gray. However, there was a dim glow flashing deep within the gray. Ji Yunhai slowly sat up and lowered his head to check his body. A moment later, a smile was revealed on the corner of his mouth. Not bad. So this is how you use this puppet. It must be different from Madame Ji's method. At the same time, Su Ming also opened his eyes. Once he met Ji Yunhai's gaze, a smile appeared on his face, but there was also a strange look on his face. Su Ming looked at Ji Yunhai, and he had a feeling as if he had been split into two. One of them gathered on Ji Yunhai with his power as an immortal, and the other was his true self, looking at Ji Yunhai, who was being controlled by him in a manner similar to possession. Su Ming smiled. Ji Yunhai, who was being controlled by his nascent soul, also smiled. With one move, buzzing sounds immediately came from another stone chamber, and a large swarm of black beetles woke up at that moment and rushed over. Su Ming's pupils shrank, but he did not move. Even Ji Yunhai, who was being controlled by his nascent soul, did not move. He simply allowed the beetles to come to him. Once they covered his entire body, Ji Yunhai looked as if he had turned into another person. If no one looked closely, they would not be able to tell that his flesh and blood were actually formed by these black beetles. If that's the case, then this can also be considered as one of my clones. Su Ming felt his spirit rise. He had seen Tion's projection before, and now that he also possessed this strange clone, it allowed Su Ming to gain a greater understanding towards the immortal's divine abilities. Su Ming was already sitting down cross-legged. With a single thought, a hint of a smile immediately appeared on his clone's black face. He turned around and walked out of his cave abode. As he watched his clone leave, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and with a flip of his palm, a crystal the size of a fist appeared on his palm. It was the wind crystal of berserkers. As he stared at this item, A strange look appeared on Su Ming's face. He had tried everything he could think of, but it was still difficult for him to fuse with this item. However, the battle against Madame G that day had allowed him to gain a hint of inspiration through Madame G's divine ability when he fought against her. However, he had lost his consciousness after that. Only when he returned to his cave abode did he calm down and think about whether that hint of inspiration at that time could work. It doesn't matter whether it's the power of the god of berserkers, Han Mountain Bell, or even my power as an immortal. They're all external powers to me. I can't rely on them too much. Only my own power as a berserker can make me stronger. Su Ming stared at the wind crystal of berserkers, and an indescribable light shone in his eyes. This method might actually work. Su Ming gritted his teeth. At that moment, his clone walked out of his cave abode under the control of his nascent soul. The instant he did so, the small snake lying on the poisoned corpse's head immediately looked towards Su Ming's clone with a puzzled look on its face. Su Ming's clone smiled faintly and swung his right hand at the ground. Immediately, the tribe leader of Black Crane flew towards him and was swept up by him. With one move, he rose into the air and turned into a long arc that charged into the distance. When he approached the spot where Hong Luo had placed the seal, Su Ming's clone lifted his right hand and formed a seal before pointing at the air. Immediately, ripples appeared before him, and Su Ming's clone walked into those ripples and disappeared without trace. When he reappeared, Su Ming's clone was standing in midair. When he lowered his head to look down, he could no longer see the mountain range beneath him, only empty space. Not too far away was a fire-red ape squatting there and staring at him with a dumbfounded expression. When he saw the fire ape, Su Ming's clone let out a boisterous laugh. His face was filled with delight, and he lifted his right hand to point at the fire ape. Immediately, ripples appeared in the air before the ape, revealing the entrance to the mountain range. The fire ape was momentarily stunned before it immediately crawled inside, and the entrance disappeared. The smile on Su Ming's clone's lips gradually disappeared, replaced by a cold and dark look. He looked in the direction of Black Crane Tribe, and with one move, he charged towards it. 2 hours later, the surprise arrived. Please recommend me. Please give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to give me recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 443. That clone looked like an incredibly strong man from a distance. He was about 10 feet tall and had no hair on his head. His entire body was black, and there were waves of murderous aura spreading out from him. That murderous aura came from the black beetles. At the same time, there was an incredibly thick life force within that murderous aura, along with an equally thick aura of death hidden within. The fusion of life and death could be said to be perfect, and it was enough to shock all those who saw it. This was not a normal puppet. In fact, it could be said that there were many differences between this clone and the Soul Catcher's puppets. In fact, due to Su Ming's nascent soul, this clone looked no different from a normal person. As Su Ming's clone moved forward, black fog tumbled about under his feet, and faint buzzing sounds reverberated in the air. If anyone lifted their heads to look from the ground, they would definitely be shocked by this scene. Black Crane Tribe was not too far away from the mountain range. With Su Ming's clone's speed, he closed in very soon. From the sky, smoke could be seen rising from the chimneys of Black Crane Tribe's mountain. It was noon at that moment, and it was clear that most of the people in the tribe were lighting up fires and making food. Some children were still playing. The warriors of Black Crane Tribe around them were not vigilant, but had instead become lazy. The stone statue that looked like a crane at the top of the mountain cast a shadow on the ground under the sun. As time passed by, that shadow would slowly move. The entire tribe was at peace, but once Su Ming arrived, that peace turned into cries of surprise. The children quickly ran back to their houses, and the warriors who were lazing around looked at the sky in shock, their expressions changing drastically. Su Ming's clone appeared in the sky above Black Crane Tribe with black fog that surged into the sky. His black face and murderous aura caused Su Ming's appearance to cause an uproar in Black Crane tribe. Su Ming looked coldly at the nervous shaman warriors in the small tribe beneath him. With one move, he flew down and landed on the top of the mountain, right on a gigantic crane crown. When he landed, Su Ming spoke in a low voice. "Patriarch of Black Crane tribe, come out." Almost at the same time, Su Ming's clone said those words. Several old men immediately rushed out of their houses in the tribe underneath. There was a thin old man among them. He held a bone staff in his hand, and his face was livid with rage. He stared at Su Ming, but his heart was filled with shock and apprehension. He had never seen Ji Yanhai before. At that moment, when he saw Su Ming's appearance, especially the life force and aura of death that filled his entire body, along with that murderous aura, made the old man feel as if he could smell blood. "Sir, who are you?" "I am the patriarch of Black Crane tribe." The old man took a step forward and struck the ground with the bone staff in his hand while speaking in a low voice. Su Ming's clone laughed coldly. He did not speak, but lifted his right hand and pointed downwards. Immediately, a dried-up corpse appeared behind him and charged towards the old man. With a bang, it landed on the ground. It was naturally the tribe leader of Black Crane tribe. At the instant the patriarch of Black Crane tribe saw the corpse, his pupils shrank. The other clansmen around him also looked at the corpse, and their expressions changed. "Sir, what is the meaning of this? Who is this person? I've never seen him before." The patriarch of Black Crane tribe gritted his teeth and spoke in a low voice. He could tell with just one glance that the corpse belonged to the tribe leader of Black Crane tribe, but he could not admit to it. He could not tell whether the black man before him was sent by Madame Ji or the master of the mountain range. Yet no matter who it was, he could not afford to provoke them. That was why he could only grit his teeth and refuse to admit to it. It doesn't matter whether you admit to it or not. A freezing glare shone in Su Ming's clone's eyes, and he lifted his right hand slowly. This shaman tribe had caused him to go through so many dangers during the past half a year. If it was not because he did not want to cause any trouble in the beginning and did not kill this tribe, only teaching them a small lesson, then perhaps this would not have happened. Hong Luo's appearance and the series of events that happened afterward might be incredibly meaningful to Su Ming, but he had also made a lot of enemies in the shaman tribe. He could not say whether it was worth it or not, but if he did not pay the price for the source of all this, there was no way Su Ming would let it go. Almost at the instant Su Ming lifted his right hand, the patriarch of Black Crane tribe let out a piercing howl and rushed out. Behind him, the other powerful berserkers from Black Crane tribe also flew up in an instant and charged towards Su Ming. Compared to White Bull tribe's forbearance, Black Crane tribe chose to attack. A cold sneer appeared on Su Ming's lips. He might not have completely gotten used to this body, but with the black beetles on his body, the combat abilities he could bring forth would be much stronger. The instant the people from Black Crane tribe rushed towards him, Su Ming let out a cold harumph. Immediately, a deafening buzzing sound rose from his body, and as if his body was disintegrating, the black beetles scattered and flew out. At the same time, they turned into black fog. They hissed and charged towards the charging people from Black Crane tribe with a murderous look. At the same time, Su Ming's clone's true appearance was revealed. His thin body and gray eyes caused all those who saw him to be filled with fear. Shrill screams of pain instantly traveled into the air, and the oncoming people were covered by a large amount of black beetles. Blood spilled all over their bodies, and they no longer continued charging forward, choosing instead to retreat rapidly. Su Ming's clone stood on the crane's crown and watched all of this coldly. He lifted his right hand and formed a seal, then pointed forward. Immediately, the power of the world around him surged towards him with a bang and gathered into a gigantic sword before him. That sword was lifted up and charged downwards. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe let out a low growl and pushed his hands outwards. Once his hands crashed into the incoming sword through the air, he shuddered and his face immediately turned purplish red. He froze the sword in midair. Su Ming's clone's expression did not change. He only said one word coldly: "Explode." The moment he said those words, the sword exploded and stirred up a whirlwind that swept through the area. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe coughed out a mouthful of blood and was sent tumbling backwards. Yet the instant he was sent tumbling backwards, Su Ming's clone took a step forward and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When the patriarch of Black Crane tribe saw this, he immediately felt that something bad was about to happen. When he turned around swiftly, his pupils shrank. He saw a finger swiftly pointing at the center of his brows. In the face of a life and death crisis, the patriarch of Black Crane tribe bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. His body immediately shriveled up rapidly, as if he had aged several dozens of years in an instant. His face was filled with wrinkles, and his chi was weak. At the same time, Su Ming's clone's finger pierced through the center of his brows. His body slowly dissipated. Clearly, this was an afterimage. The old man's body reappeared several hundreds of feet away. His face was ashen, and there was fear on his face. Shrill screams of pain rang non-stop around him. All the warriors in the tribe were surrounded by the black beetles that refused to die. These insects were strange insects that Ji Yunhai had personally refined and cultivated in the past. It could be said that these insects were the reason why he was infamous in the shaman tribe. There was no way that a member of this small tribe could kill these insects so easily. After all, even Su Ming had only managed to make these insects fall asleep when he isolated Ji Yunhai's body. Sacred progenitor Black Crane, I will use my flesh and blood as an offering to awaken you. When the tribe leader of Black Crane tribe saw the warriors in his tribe dying one by one, his eyes turned bloodshot, and with a ferocious expression, he tore open his chest. He did not care about his blood flowing out and his life force gradually fading away as he grabbed his own heart right before Su Ming. That heart was still beating, and the old man lifted it high into the air. A focused look appeared on Su Ming's face. Immediately, a large amount of similar voices reached his ears, and they came from the tribe members who were fighting against the black beetles. With crazed expressions on their faces, they imitated the old man's actions and tore open their own chests, took out their hearts, and lifted them high into the air. Sacred progenitor Black Crane, accept our offering. Please awaken, and give this person your sacred punishment. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe coughed up blood. The instant he finished speaking, cracks immediately appeared on the gigantic crane statue at the top of Black Crane tribe's mountain. As cracking sounds reverberated in the air, it turned into an endless amount of shards that shot outwards in all directions. At the same time, a black shadow flew out from the shattered stone statue, and in midair, it turned into a huge black crane that was 100 feet tall. That crane let out a screech, and its body turned into a ray of black light that charged towards the patriarch of Black Crane tribe. It bit down on the heart, and once it swallowed it, the black light shone once again. In the span of a few breaths, it had swallowed all of the sacrifice's hearts, and only then did it look towards Su Ming with a cold gaze. You're just a puppet in the Berserker soul realm. You're not worthy of me attacking you. Get lost, or else I won't mind keeping you here as my plaything. As that cold voice tumbled out of the black crane's mouth, an incredibly powerful presence spread out from its body. That presence was so strong that it caused the weather to change slightly, and even the clouds to look as if they had darkened. Su Ming's pupils shrank. As he stared at the black crane, uncertainty rose in his heart. Sacred progenitor, you can't let him leave. Strangely enough, the old man who had lost his heart was still alive. He was lying by the side and struggling to speak. All right, I'll give you 10 breaths. If you still don't leave, then perhaps I'll change my mind and keep you here. After all, it's been tens of thousands of years since I last killed. The presence within the black crane's body became stronger once again. It looked at Su Ming, and with a posture that made it seem as if it was looking down on him, it spoke languidly. Su Ming's eyes sparkled, and he spread his divine sense outward swiftly. As it covered the entire area, it even swept past the crane's body before eventually focusing on the small piece of stone left on the shattered stone statue. Divine sense. The black crane's expression changed. When it saw Su Ming staring at the remaining half of the stone statue, panic immediately appeared in its eyes, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye and turned into a ghastly look. If you're not leaving, then stay here. When the crane spoke, its presence became stronger once again. The world rumbled faintly, and, as the wind and clouds tumbled about, its body grew larger once again until it was several thousands of feet tall. Its voice was like a tidal wave that spread in all directions. However, Su Ming turned a deaf ear to it and did not even spare a glance. He walked towards the remaining half of the stone statue, lifted his right hand, and pressed down on it. You? What are you doing? Stop. Let's talk, brother. Haha. This is a surprise. Third update. Follow-up update. There's something else. On the morning of the 25th of this month, Air Jin will be signing books for the physical copies of The Renegade Immortal at Shidong Book Tower in Beijing. On the afternoon of the 26th, he will be signing books at Shanghai Book City in Shanghai. At that time, I hope to see all of you at these two places. Thank you. Also, there's one more thing. I want to thank all my fellow Taoists from The Renegade Immortal for supporting me for the past 3 years. If I had enough money, I would have given each of you a physical copy of The Renegade Immortal. It's a pity that I can't afford it, so I can only give each of the Alliance Masters a copy. Be careful of your creativity. If you don't like it, please contact the moderator and give me the address. It'll take a little longer. After all, I haven't seen the physical copy yet, but all the Xinhua bookstores in the country are selling it. My fellow Taoists, you can go and take a look. As for Chu Mo, the physical copy will also be on sale soon. At that time, I will still give each of the Alliance Masters a copy. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 444. The moment Su Ming pressed down on the half of the stone statue, cracks immediately appeared on it. As cracking sounds reverberated in the air, the black crane that had turned into 1,000 feet tall stirred up a violent gust of wind behind Su Ming and charged towards him. There's a door in the Great Tao, but you didn't come, and there's no way out for you in hell. You just had to force your way in. Let your grandpa crane kill you. The 1,000 feet black crane had a ferocious look on its face. With a murderous air, its gigantic body closed in on Su Ming in the span of a breath. With one flap of its wings, a strong gust of wind immediately blew against the people on the ground, forcing them to continuously move back. However, when that gust of wind blew against Su Ming's body, it only made him freeze for a moment. After that, there was no other effect. Su Ming turned his head around and cast a glance at the 1,000 feet tall black crane. He lifted his right hand and slammed his palm down on the half of the stone statue where the cracks had appeared. The instant his palm landed, the eyes of the nascent soul in Su Ming's body shone, and a powerful force spread out from his right arm and crashed into the stone statue. With a loud bang, the stone statue immediately shattered into pieces before Su Ming and shot outwards. However, there was nothing within it, and Su Ming could not help but frown. When he had probed this place with his divine sense, he had clearly sensed a faint ripple of power in this place. It was precisely this ripple that had stirred up the power of the world in the area and turned it into the giant crane in midair. The 1,000 feet tall crane seemed to let out a sigh of relief, then stared at Su Ming from midair and spoke sternly, "Oomph. Oh well, I'll give you one more chance. If you leave now, then I'll forget about this, but if you don't, then don't blame me for attacking. I'm telling you, I'm very good." Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He turned around swiftly, and with a single move, he appeared beside one of the shattered stones. He grabbed one of them, and the illusion of a palm appeared on his right hand. As Su Ming squeezed his hand, the illusion also gripped the stone. With a bang, the stone immediately shattered, and there was nothing inside. However, Su Ming did not stop. With a flash, he closed in on another stone and did the same thing, crushing it once again. "You're going too far." Terror appeared on the face of the 1,000 feet tall crane in the sky, as if it was incredibly angry. It flapped its wings, and let out a piercing screech. You must think that I only know how to scare people, and that's why you're not afraid, right? All right, looks like I'll have to break the oath I made all those years ago. Once I injure you gravely, I'll see whether you still think that way. As the 1,000-foot-tall crane spoke in a shrill voice, its body began to spin in midair. As it spun, black feathers shot out from within the vortex. Su Ming was holding a stone in his hand. Once he crushed it, he immediately sensed danger coming towards him. Without turning his head back, Su Ming moved forward and his body instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already 100 feet away from where he had been previously. As the ground trembled and an endless amount of stones and dust tumbled down from the mountain, a gigantic pit swiftly appeared at the spot where he had been previously. Up in Ming, the sound, and the feathers shot and flew up in the air. In of the air, and in the air. In Su Ming. Haha, now you've witnessed my power, haven't you? It's too late for you to leave now. There was a smug tone in the voice of the 1,000 feet tall crane in the sky. At that moment, it turned around once again, and once it turned into a vortex, more feathers charged out and chased after Su Ming. The entire sky was filled with black feathers. All of them were incredibly sharp, and, as they charged forward, they chased after Su Ming. The gray eyes of Su Ming's clone sparkled. He warped a few times, but he still could not avoid the feathers. In fact, as he dodged, 8 of the feathers had already pierced his body. They quickly melted and turned into wisps of black smoke that seeped into his body and charged towards his nascent soul. Su Ming let out a piercing howl, and with a flash, he appeared on the ground once again. The feathers in the sky chased after him. The instant they closed in on him from midair, Su Ming spread his arms wide. Immediately, the black beetles around him turned into black clouds that charged towards him from all directions. Before the feathers could pierce him, the black beetles had already covered his entire body, causing his clone to once again return to the body of a tall, muscular man that was entirely black. Booming sounds rose into the air, and the feathers fell on Su Ming's body like rain, causing the ground under his feet to shatter and sink. It also caused Su Ming's body to sink into the pit, and he continued sinking. The feathers pierced into his body and turned into black smoke, intending to seep into his body through the black beetles. In the blink of an eye, the booming sounds in the pit did not stop. When all the feathers disappeared into the pit, the tribe members of Black Crane Tribe who saw everything immediately let out cheers. The 1,000 feet tall crane looked incredibly pleased with itself in midair. It flapped its wings and let out a few fake coughs. I originally didn't want to deal a heavy blow because of the oath I made in the past, but this person simply doesn't know what's good for him. Oh well, tribe members, remember to prepare more tributes. I'm tired, I'm going. Just as the 1,000 feet tall crane was speaking, its voice suddenly came to a halt. Its eyes looked as if they were about to pop out of their sockets, and it looked towards the pit on the ground. A mighty pressure spread out from within the pit, and soon after, light shone from within. As that light shone, a small person the size of a palm floated out from within. The small person's face was dark. It no longer looked like Ji and Hai, but was naturally Su Ming's nascent soul. The people of Black Crane Tribe had never seen this sort of nascent soul before. Once they saw it, they were all stunned. The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe, who had lost his heart but was still alive, also widened his eyes. Nascent soul, you're an immortal. Damn it. How dare you fly out when you're just a nascent soul at this level? Hurry up and go back. Do you know that even a gust of cold wind can shatter your nascent soul? Why you? Hurry up and go back. The 1,000 feet tall crane immediately panicked. Su Ming's nascent soul floated out of the pit. His eyes sparkled as he cast a glance at the crying crane. To him, this crane was now vastly different from before. This black crane was a complete illusion, and only the black feather within its body truly existed. Su Ming did not bother himself with the black crane. He immediately lowered his head, and a dark light shone in his eyes as he swept his gaze across the ground. He moved forward and immediately warped away. When he reappeared, he was already on a shattered stone not too far away. He seized the air with his small hand, and a stone immediately charged towards his palm. "Brother, we can talk things out, don't—" The 1,000 feet tall crane immediately screeched. As it screeched, the stone that Su Ming had sucked towards him shattered and exploded on its own before Su Ming could even grab it. A ray of black light flew out from within, and within that black light was a small black crane the size of a fist. That small crane looked incredibly cute. It was bald, and there were only a few feathers on its body. At first glance, it did not look like a crane, but like a long-necked chick whose feathers had been plucked off. At that moment, the small crane's face was filled with panic, and as it charged forward, it wanted to escape. A glint appeared in Su Ming's nascent soul's eyes, and it quickly chased after it. The small crane let out a piercing screech, and its speed instantly increased by several fold as it charged towards the 1,000 feet tall crane in the sky. At the same time, the 1,000 feet tall crane shuddered in midair, and its body instantly turned into an illusion before it eventually turned into a feather. Just as the small crane was about to bite it, Su Ming's nascent soul opened its mouth, and a ray of green light charged out. It was naturally the small virescent sword, with a speed that was several times faster than when Su Ming himself executed it. It appeared before the small crane. The few feathers on the small crane's body immediately stood up, and as it screamed, it no longer bothered about the black feather. Instead, with a single move, it swiftly fled into the distance. With a few flashes, it disappeared without a trace. Su Ming's nascent soul moved and grabbed the black feather. He stared at the spot where the small crane had disappeared and chased after it swiftly. "Damn it! I'm a sacred spirit of Dao Chun. You're just a puny nascent soul cultivator. I could kill you with just one puff in the past, and now I'm being bullied by someone in the Berserker's land. Why you? Just you wait." The small crane immediately dodged to the side in midair and avoided a ray of green light that charged past it. It was so frightened that it shuddered, and its pathetic appearance made it look like a long-necked chick that had shed its feathers, and it started fleeing even faster. Su Ming's nascent soul chased after it relentlessly. He could naturally tell that this crane was very strange, and it should be an immortal. Now that he had run into it, he would definitely not let it go so easily. "You forced me to do this. I'll fight you to the death." When it saw that Su Ming was getting closer to it, that green light was howling even more frequently, and the grievance in its heart, because that feather that was incredibly important to it had been snatched away. This chick. The more the small crane thought about it, the more aggrieved it felt. At that moment, it turned around swiftly, and madness appeared in its eyes. Sacred light of Dao Chun. It let out a piercing screech and opened its mouth to let out a breath in Su Ming's direction. That breath had no form, but at the instant it exhaled, a powerful light shone in the air. Immediately, the power of the world in the area was sucked towards it, making it look like a sun. It did not rush towards Su Ming, but instead exploded between him and the small crane. There was no rumble, only a gust of wind that seemed to have come crashing into Su Ming's face. There was a powerful pushing force contained within it. It pushed Su Ming's nascent soul back. At the same time, the small crane let out a shrill scream of pain in the other direction, and it was pushed back as well, causing its speed to instantly become several times faster. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. Why has this damn sacred light of Dao Chun become so weak? I wasn't bragging in the past when I said that I could destroy an expanse cosmos with one breath, but now I can't even kill a small cultivator in the nascent soul realm. Just you wait. I hold grudges, very, very grudges. As the small crane left into the distance, its voice gradually became weaker. As for Su Ming, due to the violent gust of wind and the pushing force, his nascent soul was pushed back several hundreds of thousands of feet. He had to warp a few times before he managed to avoid the impact of the pushing force. But even so, his nascent soul had become much more transparent. As he stood in midair, Su Ming did not bother himself with the nascent soul's transparent and weakened state. Instead, he stared in the direction where the small crane had fled. After some time, he let out a cold harumph, turned around, and left. 15 days, 42 chapters, nearly 130,000 words. Even if it was not 10,000 words per day, it was not that far off. I've tried my best. I've already given it my all. And tomorrow, I'm going to have another 3 consecutive days of explosive power, but the monthly votes. I fell from the top 3 to the 4th today. To beg for monthly votes, I beg for you to rush up. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 445. The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe's face was pale as he stared blankly at the sky. A bitter smile appeared on his lips. He knew that he had to die. He could not blame anyone else for this. If he had not been greedy for shaman crystals and tried to destroy White Bull Tribe, he would not have ended up in this predicament. Most of the tribe members who had offered their hearts to him were already dead. There were only a few old men left beside the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe. Their faces were as pale as paper, and their breathing was weak. Elder, hurry up and cast your art. I beg you, don't be like this anymore. Hurry up and cast your art. According to the art passed down by our ancestors, you won't die. A middle-aged man knelt before the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe and spoke anxiously. I have to die. If I don't die, that person won't be able to get rid of his grudge. If my death can bring peace to the entire tribe, then my death will be worth it. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have been greedy for shaman crystals. The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe spoke in anguish. He had lived for a long time and was the patriarch of a tribe. There was no way he would be a fool. He knew clearly that he had to die this time. Elder, the middle-aged man and all the other tribe members' faces were filled with grief. All right, I've made my decision. Once I die, give the tribe's sacred relic, the 3 feathers, to him in exchange for the hope of protecting the tribe. Then bring our tribe members away from this place and migrate ahead of schedule. From now on, you'll be the patriarch of the tribe. Blood trickled down the corners of the patriarch's mouth as he looked at the middle-aged man kneeling before him. The man's face was filled with grief, and he did not speak. Remember, don't think about revenge. The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe laughed brokenly and fell to the side dead. He could have lived, but he could not. He could not die, but for the tribe, he had to die. As he died, the old men who had lost their hearts also stopped breathing. Most of the powerful warriors in Black Crane Tribe had died. When Su Ming's nascent soul returned from Adair, he saw the corpse of the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe and the members of Black Crane Tribe kneeling on the ground with a middle-aged man as their leader once they saw him. With a calm expression, Su Ming charged towards the pit on the ground. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, his clones slowly flew out of the pit. Sir, please forgive our Black Crane Tribe. Our tribe is willing to give you this sacred item. Once Su Ming flew out, the middle-aged man from Black Crane Tribe lifted his arms high into the air with grief on his face. There was a stone plate in his hands, and there were 3 black feathers on it. The 3 feathers exuded waves of mighty pressure, but compared to the feathers Su Ming had obtained previously, it was simply insignificant. Once Su Ming swept his aloof gaze past the 3 feathers, he did not look at the middle-aged man, but instead looked at the dead patriarch of Black Crane Tribe. He remembered that the old man's heart had been eaten by the small crane, but he had not died. Clearly, Black Crane Tribe's offering had a secret art that allowed them to retain their life force. Yet now the old man had still died. Su Ming closed his eyes, and when he opened them after a moment, understanding appeared in his eyes. He paid the price. This matter is over. Su Ming averted his gaze, and once he looked at the normal tribe members in the tribe, he walked into midair and turned into a long arc that gradually disappeared into the horizon. He did not take away the 3 feathers. They were useless to him, but to a small tribe that had lost most of its powerful warriors, they were incredibly useful. Su Ming was not a ruthless person. His grudge also disappeared when the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe and the other powerful berserkers died. Su Ming sat cross-legged in his cave abode in the mountain range with the wind crystal of inheritance in his hand. There was a long wound on his arm, and his blood had already dried up. His expression was constantly changing. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that the wind crystal of inheritance had shrunk a little. When Madame G brought out the red ring that day, she put it on one of her bones, and with that method, she could use the ring. Otherwise, she wouldn't have had to go through so much pain. She could have just put it on her finger. Su Ming mumbled softly to himself. I tried putting into the wound on my arm just now, and as I circulated my chi, I did manage to absorb some of it, but it's very little, so it won't be of much use. Su Ming held the wind crystal of inheritance tightly and gritted his teeth. Oh well, I'll try using my original plan, but I can't do it here. The temperature here is normal. If I use that method, I'll lose too much blood. Su Ming stood up and took a deep breath. He lifted his head and looked at the fire ape squatting against the wall not too far away, and a smile appeared on his face. The fire ape also looked at Su Ming and bared its teeth in a smile, looking incredibly excited. Su Ming patted the fire ape's head and walked out of the cave abode. Once he walked out, the small snake on the poison corpse's head immediately looked towards him. After a moment of pensive silence, Su Ming gave up on the idea of bringing the poison corpse with him. Once he sent out a thought to appease the small snake, he walked out of the mountain range and towards the frozen gate to the void that was floating low in the air. As he stood outside the gate to the void, Su Ming closed his eyes as if he was waiting for something. After a moment, ripples shone in the sky, and Su Ming's clone appeared. With a single move, it stood behind him. Su Ming opened his eyes and lifted his right hand to press on the frozen gate to the void. Immediately, some of the layers of ice shattered, and once a crack appeared, Su Ming walked forward. His clone followed behind him, and as the light from the gate to the void shone, they disappeared without a trace. In the depths of the black seawater was an endless glacier. This place was still dark, and there were countless living beings sealed within the glacier. They retained their appearances when they were still alive, and they looked as if they were struggling. This place was quiet. It was as if not a single sound had traveled out over the course of countless years. Only some of the black seawater would occasionally reveal their bodies when they passed by this place. There was a vortex sealed within an ice mountain on the glacier. At that moment, as dark light shone on that vortex, two figures appeared. They were naturally Su Ming and his clone. Once they appeared, they did not move. Clearly, they were also sealed in ice. Several days later, as the ice cracked and shattered, Su Ming and his clone were finally able to move around in the ice mountain. The freezing air in Su Ming's body was bone-chilling, and his flesh and blood felt as if they were about to freeze. The circulation of his blood had also become much slower. His clone stood by the side, and with the black beetles around him, along with the fact that this puppet was already dead, it was only natural that he was not afraid of the cold. The aura of death in his body had fused with the freezing air, and his movements were much more agile than Su Ming's. At that moment, his eyes shone brightly, and he was prepared to protect his real body. Su Ming sat down on the ice in the small area where he could move around. He closed his eyes and waited for a few more hours. When his body was almost completely frozen, he opened his eyes, and as he lifted his right hand, the wind crystal of inheritance appeared. At the same time, his clone opened his mouth and spat out a ray of green light that turned into a small sword. Under the control of his nascent soul, that small sword charged towards Su Ming. With a loud thud, the small sword stabbed into Su Ming's back. His body, which was frozen by the freezing air, became numb to the pain, and it also became milder. Su Ming only frowned and did not make a single sound. The small sword stabbed into his back and slowly cut downwards, revealing a small part of his spine. Blood spilled out and soaked the ice. Due to the existence of the freezing air, there was not much blood, but this sort of pain still made Su Ming's breathing quicken, even if his body was frozen. There were 4 bones on Su Ming's spine that were shining with a blue light. Those were his berserker bones. As the small sword stabbed into him, a glint appeared in Su Ming's clone's eyes. When he lifted his right hand, the wind crystal of inheritance in Su Ming's real body's hand floated up, and once it circled above Su Ming's head, it charged towards his back and sank into the cut. Once it touched the fifth part of Su Ming's spine, it stuck tightly to him. Su Ming's face was pale. His entire body might be freezing cold, but there were still beads of sweat breaking out on his skin. However, there was determination on his face. He lifted his trembling right hand and seized the air. Immediately, the other half of the lightning crystal of inheritance appeared in his palm. After a moment of hesitation, Su Ming gritted his teeth. Immediately, the lightning crystal of inheritance flew up in a flash and sank deep into the wound on his back, right beside the sixth part of his spine. Once the other two crystals of inheritance were forcefully planted in his body, he closed his eyes and dispersed the power of his cultivation base that was used to fight against the cold. Ice slowly spread around his body, and eventually it turned his entire body into an ice sculpture, and he was sealed in ice. Su Ming's clone sat by the side with a wary look on his face. He was observing his surroundings and providing protection for his real body. Time trickled by. Su Ming did not know how much time he would need to complete this rather insane act. In fact, if it was not because of his clone, it would have been difficult for him to do this. With this method, if he was the slightest bit careless, he might die in the ice in his weakened state. Due to the existence of his nascent soul, his clone could sense his real body's condition. Once in a while, he would send a gentle wave of power into Su Ming's body, causing him to not truly die while he was sealed in ice. Instead, he would be stuck between life and death, causing the flesh and blood on his back to slowly be frozen, and Su Ming would gradually absorb it and gain an epiphany. At that moment, Su Ming's back looked incredibly terrifying. A small part of his spine was exposed, and his flesh had been cut open. A small amount of blood seeped into his body, and it was slowly healing. However, even if it was healing, the protruding wind crystal of inheritance and lightning crystal of inheritance were still a terrifying sight. Yet as time passed by and the wound slowly healed, the two protruding crystals of inheritance, the wind crystal of Berserker, gradually shrank. Su Ming still had his eyes closed. At the same time pain appeared on his face, he would occasionally be in a daze, and at other times he would be in deep thought, and at other times he would be filled with joy. The wind crystal of inheritance became smaller, and on an unknown day, the protruding wind crystal of inheritance had already shrunk by a large margin. There might still be some slight protrusions left, but if Su Ming did not look closely, it would be difficult to notice. On this day, a storm for the inheritance of inheritance stirred up in Su Ming's mind. Tomorrow, my fellow Taoists, it's the middle of the month, and the monthly votes have also been produced. We'll be giving out votes for 3 consecutive days. To be continued. If you like this work, then please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 446. Dear, it's going to be Friday again, and it's going to start again. We were 3rd in the morning, and now we're 4th. Tomorrow, the day after, and the day after, what will our ranking be? Will it be 5th, 6th, 7th, or 3rd, 2nd, or 1st? I don't know, and I can't predict, but I'll do my best. Tomorrow, I'll guarantee 4 chapters, but if the total number of votes reaches 4,000, I'll have 5 chapters tomorrow. I'm still short of 400. I'll definitely do it. Begging for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 447. The gray sky was shrouded in fog. It was as if a sea of clouds was tumbling about in the area. At first glance, it was impossible to tell whether this was the ocean in the sky or the sea on the ground. Su Ming could not sense his own body. It was as if he had turned into a gust of wind in the sea of clouds and was drifting about in the world. He did not know where he was going. Perhaps a long time had passed, or perhaps it had only been a moment. Su Ming, who was in a slightly dazed state of mind, suddenly saw a long-haired man sitting cross-legged in the endless sea of gray clouds and the sea of clouds before him. That man was tall and thin. He wore a green robe and had very long hair. He might not be handsome, but there was an elegant air about him, especially his long and narrow eyes. At first glance, they looked like a woman's eyes, and they were like the eyes of a phoenix, making them hard to forget. At the same time, Su Ming saw the man. The man opened his eyes slowly, and a brilliant light shone briefly within them. "You're here, my scion." Su Ming's heart trembled. His slightly dazed mind suddenly cleared up, and he remembered that he was absorbing the wind berserker's inheritance in the glacier. He remembered the windstorm that had stirred up in his mind at the final moment, and the scenes where he had appeared in the sea of clouds like a soul after the windstorm. Only the first person to receive this inheritance will be able to see me. The scions after you will not be looking at me, but at you, the man with the long and narrow eyes said languidly in a gentle voice. "I'm a wind berserker. I have understood the power of wind and became a saint. I fought with the god of berserkers against the ninth plane, Culpa expanse cosmos, and no matter where I went, no one dared to not worship me. Right now, what remains in this place is a fragment of my will that I left behind when I followed the god of berserkers and left the ninth plane, Culpa expanse cosmos, to search for a chance to break through to the next plane, Culpa expanse cosmos, so that my descendants can inherit my wind berserker art. The power of the wind berserker changes constantly, and I cannot inherit it one by one. That is why I have turned it into 3 divine abilities. If you can master all of them, then you will understand a fifth of the wind berserker art. The first of the 3 styles of wind separation is sun genesis. The man with the long and narrow eyes spoke slowly. At the instant he said those words, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he lifted his right hand, then swung it towards the sky above the sea of clouds, parting the clouds in the sky, causing the sea of clouds to churn, revealing the sun. This young opening power requires wind. As his words echoed out, the sea of clouds churned violently and turned into a huge whirlpool. With the man as the center, the whirlpool began to spin endlessly. Su Ming stood by the side and watched the sea of clouds rotate. He could already imagine that if anyone on the ground lifted their heads at this moment, they would definitely see a terrifying sight. It would be a shocking sight where all the clouds in the sky were rotating and turning into a vortex. Where does the wind come from? The man with slender eyes smiled. Wind rises from my sleeves and is sent into the sky, stirring up the sea of clouds. When the sea of clouds becomes a vortex, the wind will be returned countless times over. To be precise, sun genesis is divided into 3 levels. The first is sending wind, the second is borrowing wind, the third is fusing wind, and the last is sun genesis. The man with the long and narrow eyes clenched his right fist, and the instant he did so, the sea of clouds that had turned into a vortex surged towards the man with a loud rumble. Eventually, as Su Ming's heart trembled, he saw the vortex disappear into the man's right fist. It was as if the process of him clenching his fist was the instant the endless sea of clouds swiftly gathered towards him. It was as if the man's right hand was holding onto the endless sea of clouds in the vortex just now. It was as if the power in his hands was the endless power that belonged to the wind in the world. Sun genesis. The man clenched his right fist and threw a punch forward in a seemingly gentle and powerless manner. But when he did so, an indescribably violent gust of wind erupted from the man's hand. It was as if a shocking thunder had stirred up in the silent dawn, as if a storm that was 100,000 feet long had erupted on the quiet surface of the sea, as if a loud bang had resounded on the flat ground. The violent gust of wind turned into a wind dragon, and as it roared, it charged out and tore through the sky, causing a gigantic hole to appear in the air. The wind dragon roared and crawled into the hole before disappearing without a trace. Second style, lunar burial. The wind berserker with the long and narrow eyes narrowed his eyes, and a green glare appeared within them. I personally like this style a lot. I didn't create this style on my own, but gained an epiphany from an ancient legend. I even went to a lot of ruins before I finally managed to bring out this ancient legend. I've always thought that this art has always existed, but it was lost in the passage of time, and I've only managed to restore it slightly. There was a legend in ancient times that once the people of ancient times died, they were not buried in the sky or the earth, but buried in the wind. They were buried in the wind. A smile appeared on the man's lips, but that smile looked a little evil. He pointed at the ground beneath him with his right hand. When Su Ming lowered his head to look, the ground beneath him suddenly turned into an illusion. That illusion did not last for long before it became clear. But as it did so, what appeared before Su Ming's eyes was no longer the ground from before, but a place filled with people. An innumerable amount of people whose clothes could not be seen clearly and whose faces could not be seen clearly appeared on the ground. All of them were kneeling on the ground, and words that Su Ming could not understand tumbled out of their mouths. If he looked from the sky, he would find that there were tens of thousands of people on the ground. They were packed densely together, and they formed a gigantic circle. The center of the circle was empty, and there was a gigantic wooden tower standing tall on the ground. There was also a corpse tied up at the top of the tower and hung high up in the air. My scion, look carefully. The man with the long and narrow eyes suddenly spoke. Su Ming immediately focused his mind and forced down his shock, then stared intently at the tower. Right before his eyes, the tens of thousands of people surrounded the wooden tower on the ground and started moving slowly towards a certain direction. All of them were walking, and from the sky, it looked as if the circle they formed was rotating. This scene caused Su Ming's heart to be filled with surprise. He could not tell what connection these people's actions had with the art of burial of darkness, but as time passed by, the tens of thousands of people on the ground gradually stopped walking slowly and started running. The tens of thousands of people running at the same time caused the circle to rotate even faster. Could it be that the people's running is forming a vortex, and that's why the wind is formed? A sharp glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As the tens of thousands of people ran, waves of hot air spread out from their bodies. This was the heat that naturally spread out from their bodies as they circulated their qi. It might not be much for a single person, but when tens of thousands of people ran, the heat that spread out from their bodies would be incredibly clear when seen from the sky. Once that hot air spread out from their bodies, it would slowly rise into the sky. At the same time, hundreds of people immediately shot up from the running crowd and rushed into the sky to stand above the corpses tied to the gigantic wooden tower. Once these hundreds of people sat down and floated in the air, waves of cold air spread out from their bodies. The moment that cold air spread out, it immediately filled the entire area, causing it to instantly become cold. What happened next shocked Su Ming. He saw with his own eyes the cold air spreading out from these hundreds of people descend downwards. As it descended, it crashed into the hot air that rose up from the tens of thousands of people running on the ground. The moment they crashed into each other, a violent gust of wind appeared out of nowhere and stirred up whistling sounds. At the same time, the tens of thousands of people on the ground opened their mouths and roared at the same time. Burial! That voice shook the sky, causing the tens of thousands of people to run even faster, and more hot air spread out from their bodies. The hundreds of people floating in the sky also opened their eyes and roared at the same time. Once they roared, a large amount of cold air spread out and descended downwards. Once it crashed into the hot air, an even stronger gust of wind was born, as if there was a convection. That gust of wind swept through the area and blew at the corpse tied to the gigantic wooden tower. The flesh and blood of the messenger's corpse started rapidly drying up under the indescribable man-made wind, eventually turning into a bag of bones and turning into a dried-up corpse. That was not the end. As the words "hide" and "een" continued being shouted, the wind became stronger. He had no idea how much time had passed, but as Su Ming's heart trembled, he saw the mummy's body turning into ashes. Once it disappeared from the world with the wind, this scene that was clearly some sort of ritual turned into an illusion once again and disappeared from Su Ming's eyes. "This is lunar burial," said the man with the long and narrow eyes. Su Ming stared blankly at the indistinct land that had returned to normal, and a huge storm raged in his heart. He was not shocked by the lunar burial art, but by the people's intelligence and also by how wind was formed. Is this the cause of wind? The clash between cold and heat, or perhaps I should say that the flow between cold and heat forms wind. The flow turns into wind. That's right, I can stir up wind when I throw a punch, but I've never thought about how this wind came about. By the looks of it now, the cause of wind is the two auras flowing in each other. Su Ming seemed to have come to an understanding. My scion, there is wind in every single place in the world. But if you can separate the wind in a certain area so that there is no wind in that area, then you can become the master of that area. If there is no wind, then there is no aura. And if there is no aura, then there is no power. The power of the world will be sealed away. And when there is no aura left, then from now on, the place where you are will be a forbidden zone for all life, and it will also be my wind separation. The three styles of wind separation contain my understanding towards wind in my entire life. I will teach it to you. As for the provenance of wind in your body, how much you can master will depend on your understanding. Finally, besides wind separation, I will also use what remains of my will to give you 3 chances to gain an epiphany. Each chance will correspond to a divine ability. Now, this will be the first chance, to gain an epiphany towards Sun Genesis. Once the man with the long and narrow eyes spoke, his body disappeared. Soon after, a violent gust of wind charged towards Su Ming and enveloped him within it. He only had 50 monthly votes on the first day he erupted. He could only smile wryly. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 448. Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, half a year went by. It had been a whole year since Hong Luo caused the chaos in the land of the shamans. There had been several large-scale battles outside Sky Mist City in the past year, and there were even more small-scale battles, which were becoming more and more intense. The defensive power of Sky Mist City was also gradually weakening, and most of the powerful berserkers of the Berserker tribe were stationed in Sky Mist City. A rumor regarding the Eastern Wastelands abode was spreading among the berserkers, and most of the people who heard it were skeptical. There were no longer any tribes near the edge of the Dead Sea in the land of the shamans. Almost 1/7 of the tribes had started migrating. However, there were still some tribes who did not migrate. These tribes were either too weak to migrate, or they were small tribes. Even if they migrated, it would be difficult for them to travel such a long distance, so they decided to stay in their homes. White Bull Tribe was one of these tribes. They had struggled, thought about it, and had the urge to migrate. They had even sent people out to search for other migrating tribes that passed by, but in the end, they had to give up. This place was remote to begin with. Unless they brought their tribe members out for a long time, they might run into migrating tribes, but they might not run into them. If that was the case, then it would be better for them to stay in the tribe. During the last month of this half a year, the patriarch of White Bull Tribe, the monkey-faced old man, went to the mountain range where Su Ming's cave abode was several times. He had always felt that there was something off about this place, and when he learned of everything that had happened in Black Crane Tribe, he became even more suspicious of the strangeness of Su Ming's cave abode. He came many times, and every single time, the old man would be very polite. He would respectfully shout that he wanted to see Su Ming, but he never received a reply. However, the old man did not give up. He would come every few days. Time passed by just like that. The fire ape lay lazily within the seal of the mountain range. The small snake flew about in midair, and as for the poison corpse, he continued standing outside the cave abode. He did not move even once during the past half a year. The ice on the frozen gate to the void had remained there during the past half a year. It was letting out waves of freezing air, and it had never melted. At that moment, Su Ming was in a world of glaciers under the black seawater. He was sitting cross-legged on an ice mountain. His body was completely sealed in ice, and his clone was by his side, acting as his Dharma protector for half a year. There was no longer any blood flowing out of Su Ming's back. His wound had also slowly healed during the past half a year. When he looked over, he could only see the bump on the lightning crystal of inheritance. As for the wind crystal of inheritance, it was practically invisible. There were 4 berserker bones in Su Ming's spine, but at that moment, the 5th bone was flashing with a green light, and it looked like it had changed. Its appearance might not have changed, but the feeling it gave off was similar to the wind crystal of Berserker. It was as if the shrunken wind crystal of Berserker had been absorbed by the 5th Berserker bone. Another month went by. On this day, the layer of ice around Su Ming, who had isolated himself in this place for 7 months, suddenly shuddered. At the same time it started cracking, Su Ming slowly opened his eyes. The instant he opened his eyes, besides the profound look in his eyes, there seemed to be a whirlwind that appeared in a vortex. At the same time, the layer of ice around him shattered with a bang, allowing Su Ming to regain his mobility. He quietly sensed the changes in his body, and he could clearly feel that he had become much stronger compared to before he went into isolation. More importantly, Sun Genesis, Su Ming lowered his head and looked at his right hand. A brilliant light shone in his eyes. When he was trying to understand the Wind Berserker's legacy, he had tried the art of Sun Genesis countless times during that chance to gain an epiphany. Under that sort of epiphany, Su Ming felt as if he had been reborn in that illusion filled with wind. He clenched his fists lightly and stood up slowly. The moment he did so, his clone behind him also stood up. Su Ming did not turn his head back. Instead, he stared at the world of glaciers beyond the layer of ice on the ice mountain's shell. After a moment of pensive silence, his gaze fell on the place where the green-scaled man was sealed in ice 800 feet away. After thinking about it for a moment, Su Ming lifted his right hand and touched the layer of ice before him. Immediately, cracking sounds rang out and cracks appeared on the ice. After a moment, it shattered, and a gush of black seawater instantly surged in. However, the instant the seawater surged in, Su Ming had already walked out of the ice mountain. His clone followed behind him. He did not bother himself with the ice mountain behind him. A wave of pressure descended on him in the black seawater, causing his entire body to feel cold, but his expression remained the same as ever as he slowly walked forward. One step at a time, when he was 800 feet away from the ice mountain and arrived at the place where the green-scaled man was sealed in ice, Su Ming once again felt that he was different from before. Before he fused with the wind crystal of inheritance, 800 feet was his limit, but now he felt that he could still walk several hundreds of feet. As he stared at the ice mountain that sealed the green-scaled man, Su Ming clenched his right hand into a fist and punched it. At the same time, his clone behind him took a step forward and pointed at the air with 2 fingers. Immediately, circles of dense cracks appeared in the layer of ice where Su Ming's fist landed. Green light shone, and the small sword flew out from his clone's side. When it pierced the crack, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and when the small sword retreated, he pressed his palm on the spot once again. This repeated several times. As the cracks on the layer of ice slowly spread inwards, the shards of ice on the outer layer also fell off. Su Ming's spirits lifted and he increased his speed. With his clone's help, they gradually dug out a hole on the ice mountain. Behind that hole was the black wooden club with 9 fangs in the green-scale man's hand. As the layer of ice continued becoming thinner and was only 3 inches away from the tip of the club, a violent ripple suddenly traveled out from the black seawater above the glacier. At the same time, Su Ming heard a low, muffled roar in his ears. Soon after, a gigantic, indistinct figure appeared in the black seawater. It was charging towards them rapidly, and as it closed in, that low roar shook the glacier and caused the seawater to tumble. The pressure that was formed caused Su Ming's heart to tremble. His eyes sparkled. At that moment, a hole big enough for a person to fit into the ice mountain before him had already been dug out. It was less than 3 inches away from the club, and before long, he would be able to dig through it. However, the low roar made Su Ming hesitate for a moment before a resolute look appeared on his face. He immediately clenched his right hand into a fist and rammed it against the 3-inch thin layer of ice. His clone attacked at the same time, intending to break the layer of ice before the unknown ferocious beast arrived. Yet the instant Su Ming attacked, the low roar traveled into his ears with a bang, as if it was right beside his ears. The seawater around him started distorting, and a huge wave of impact came crashing towards him with a bang. Su Ming's expression changed. Without a hint of hesitation, he immediately crawled into the hole that had been dug out. At the same time, his clone crawled in as well and blocked the entrance. At that moment, Su Ming felt the entire ground of the glacier tremble. His pupils shrank, and he saw a gigantic, ferocious beast with an astonishing presence descending from the seawater. It was a 2-headed dark turtle. The 2 gigantic heads were outside the shell of the turtle, and they were staring coldly at the layer of ice where Su Ming was hiding. At the same time, a fierce glare appeared in their eyes. They swung their tails and lifted them up. There was another head on their tails. This was not a 2-headed turtle. It was a 3-headed dark turtle. Its body was not too big, only about 1,000 feet tall. As it stood on the glacier, there were not many ripples of aura coming from its body, but the presence of its chi made Su Ming's heart tremble. Roar! The 3 heads of the dark turtle roared at Su Ming at the same time, but it just stood there. Besides roaring, it did not do anything else. Su Ming hid in the layer of ice. His clone was outside, and he was also sealed by the recovering ice mountain. He looked at the 3-headed dark turtle outside and groaned in his heart. Yet gradually, Su Ming noticed something strange about the dark turtle. The beast only roared but did not attack. This stunned Su Ming. He fell into pensive silence for a moment. When he saw that the ice mountain was gradually sealing up, he lifted his right hand and hurled a punch at the thin layer of ice that had once again shrunk to 3 inches. Cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and the thin layer of ice turned into 2 inches. It was also at that moment that the 3-headed dark turtle roared even louder, as if it had gone mad. It took a huge step forward, and as it got closer to the ice mountain, its tail charged towards the ice mountain with a whistle, but it did not hit it. Instead, it swept past the side of the ice mountain, and the dark turtle's expression became even more savage. It glared at Su Ming and started growling. This beast's chi is so strong. It's clear that it possesses great power. It's something I've never seen before, but it doesn't seem to know any divine abilities. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and judging by its actions just now, could it be that this beast can't destroy the ice mountain in this place? Could it be that it's the guardian beast of this place? A thought appeared in Su Ming's head. He moved closer to the thin layer of ice, and immediately, the dark turtle's growls became even louder. It swung its tail back and forth, letting out piercing howls. Su Ming immediately shrank back and moved a little further away from the thin layer of ice. The dark turtle visibly relaxed and no longer looked at Su Ming. Instead, it stared at the green-scaled man who was a few inches away from the thin layer of ice. Su Ming was incredibly nervous at that moment, but his mind was calm. Once he saw the dark turtle's actions, he knew that the longer he stayed in this place, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. That was why he sent a thought to his clone. His clone immediately lifted 2 of his fingers and tapped the ice around the perimeter. Since the ice had only been sealed for a short period of time, that one tap immediately created a small hole. A black beetle immediately flew out of Su Ming's clone and crawled out through the small hole. Su Ming stared at the small insect. Once it flew out, the dark turtle only cast it a glance and ignored it. It simply allowed the insect to fly 800 feet back to the ice mountain where the gate to the void was located. The 2nd chapter has been uploaded. The 3rd chapter is currently being written. It will be uploaded soon. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 449. It's not interested in us, it's interested in the things sealed in ice here. Su Ming narrowed his eyes. It was not convenient for him to anger the dark turtle at that moment and forcefully take out the black club. After a moment of pensive silence, a glint appeared in the clone's eyes. He lifted his right hand and drew a circle on the layer of ice before him with 2 fingers. With one push, the circle of ice instantly shattered. Then he took a step outwards and walked out of the ice mountain cave. Su Ming's real body stared at the dark turtle. He had already made preparations for his nascent soul to escape, but the dark turtle still only cast a glance at his clone before ignoring him. Could it be that as long as I don't touch the things sealed in ice here, the ferocious turtle will ignore me? Su Ming gritted his teeth and slowly walked out of the ice mountain cave. When he completely walked out, his heart raced against his chest. When he saw the dark turtle turn its head around and cast him a cold glance before averting its gaze, Su Ming let out a huge sigh of relief in his heart. He walked forward slowly, but once he took a few steps forward, a conflicted look appeared on his face. That struggle did not last long. Su Ming did not stop moving. As he continued moving forward, his clone immediately retreated and crawled back into the ice mountain cave. Su Ming was incredibly nervous when he did this. He continued observing the dark turtle, and when he saw that it did not have much of a reaction, he took a few brisk steps forward and eventually arrived at the ice mountain that sealed the gate to the void 800 feet away. Once he stepped inside, Su Ming immediately went to the gate to the void. Once he cleared the ice around it, he made sure that the gate would remain open at all times. Once he was done, he turned his head around and stared at the terrifying dark turtle outside, as well as his clone in the ice mountain cave 800 feet away. Should I snatch it or not? This turtle is clearly the guardian of this place. If it can be protected, then it's definitely not something ordinary. Besides, this glacier is huge. I suspect that this turtle isn't the only guardian here. Besides, when I was about to shatter the ice mountain that sealed the green-scaled man, the turtle didn't appear. Clearly, I didn't destroy it enough. This time, it appeared just as I was about to succeed. Now that I've attracted its attention, even if it doesn't come here next time, it'll be difficult for me to get close. I'll take it. A resolute look appeared on Su Ming's face. Immediately, a glint appeared in the eyes of Su Ming's clone in the cave in the ice mountain, sealing the man 800 feet away. He tapped the thin ice with 2 fingers on his right hand, and once he did so a few times, the thin ice instantly shattered to reveal the black spike club within. The dark turtle roared as if it had gone mad. As it swung its tail back and forth, Su Ming's clone pressed down on the black spiked club, intending to put it away into his storage bag, but the club did not budge. He could not put it away. Su Ming made up his mind. Immediately, his clone continued tapping away at the layer of ice with 2 fingers, causing a small portion of the black spiked club to be revealed. Then his clone wrapped his arms around the gigantic black wooden club and yanked it outwards. A loud bang rang through the air, and the gigantic black wooden club was yanked out by Su Ming's clone. The dark turtle let out a low growl and blocked the exit of the ice mountain. As it roared, a murderous aura appeared in its eyes, but at that moment, Su Ming's real body took a swift step forward. At the instant he was several hundreds of feet away from the ice mountain where the gate to the void was, his clone let out a piercing howl. Su Ming's nascent soul looked as if it was burning, and all his power erupted from his body, all of it focused on warping, causing his clone to rush outwards with the black wooden club in his arms. In an instant, his body and the wooden club disappeared. At the instant he disappeared, the dark turtle was momentarily stunned. At the same time, Su Ming's clone appeared 500-something feet away from the ice mountain. He looked the same as before, but the nascent soul within him had shrunk several times in an instant. It was also becoming unstable, as if it was about to scatter and turn into a core. Once it appeared, Su Ming's real body grabbed his clone and charged towards the ice mountain where the gate to the void was. With his extreme speed, he charged forward with a loud whoosh. The dark turtle turned its head around and let out an enraged roar. It lifted its right foot and stomped on the ground. Immediately, the ice mountain trembled, and ice spikes immediately shot up from the ground. Around Su Ming, ice spikes shot out of the ground, and as he charged forward, they shot out with loud banging sounds. They even turned into a fence of ice spikes around him, intending to stop him. At the same time, the dark turtle's tail also charged forward, and with a shocking wave of power, it lashed out. The seawater parted, and the ice spikes that did not manage to stop Su Ming were all crushed by the dark turtle's tail. Not only did the tail not slow down, it instead became even faster as it lashed towards Su Ming. The dark turtle's hatred towards Su Ming had clearly reached an extreme. Swinging its tail was not the end of it. It also opened its mouth and breathed out a mouthful of white air. When that white air was spat out, cracking sounds immediately rang out, and the seawater before the dark turtle instantly turned into ice, and that ice started spreading rapidly. As Su Ming charged forward with his clone in tow, he was blocked by the ice spikes that shot out from the ground, but he did not stop for even a single moment. With a few flashes, he activated his speed, and the provenance of wind in his body circulated rapidly, causing his speed to increase exponentially, and he rushed out of the ice spikes. When he was less than 30 feet away from the ice mountain, where the gate to the void was located, whistling sounds came from behind him, and the churning seawater parted. Su Ming's skin crawled, and his divine general armor manifested on his body. At the same time, Han Mountain Bell also appeared. At that moment, the nascent soul in his clone coughed out a mouthful of essence and warped once again, causing Su Ming's body to disappear without a trace the instant the dark turtle's tail swept past him. When he reappeared, he was already beside the gate to the void. Su Ming coughed out a mouthful of blood. Han Mountain Bell hummed and shrank back into Su Ming's body. His divine general armor also disintegrated, but the danger was not over. The moment Su Ming reappeared and dragged his clone into the gate to the void with his clone, the white air from the dark turtle behind him and the frozen seawater instantly rushed towards him, causing Su Ming's body to freeze. His face immediately turned pale, but he did not stop. He dragged his clone along with the black wooden club in his hands and stepped into the gate to the void. The instant Su Ming disappeared, the ice spread out and covered the ice mountain where the gate to the void was located, causing the ice mountain to instantly grow several times larger. Once it was sealed in ice, the dark turtle floated up and let out a crazed roar. It swung its tail non-stop, as if it was filled with extreme rage. In the end, it stared at the gate of the void that was sealed in ice. It lay there and stared at it. On the other side of the gate to the void beyond the cave abode in the land of South Morning was a dark light flapping in the air, and Su Ming and his clone rushed out from within. Once they rushed out, Su Ming's clone fell to the ground. His nascent soul was about to dissipate, and its eyes were shut tight as it circulated its energy within the clone's body to heal its injuries. Su Ming's face was pale. He turned his head back and cast a glance at the gate to the void with lingering fear in his eyes. When he remembered his actions just now, he still thought that he was a little too crazy. He sucked in a deep breath and immediately sat down cross-legged on the ground. He did not have time to bother with the small snake and fire ape that were charging towards him. He quickly sat down and began adjusting the chi in his body. Several days later, Su Ming opened his eyes. His complexion had recovered slightly, and once he let out a long breath, he immediately turned his head around and looked at the gigantic black wooden club beside his clone. The 9 teeth on that club were shining with a freezing glare. That black wooden club was as tall as Su Ming, and it gave off a barbaric air. Su Ming stood up and went to the side of the black wooden club. He lowered his head and looked at it for a moment before he lifted his right hand and grabbed the wooden club. He frowned, sucked in a light breath, and lifted the wooden club. I wonder what this thing is made of. It's so heavy. It'd be great if it was lighter. Su Ming swung it around briefly, and once he stirred up a wave of cheers, he was just about to put the wooden club down when a shudder suddenly ran through his body. His eyes went wide as he stared at the wooden club in his hand. He lifted it up once again, and once he swung it around once, disbelief appeared in his eyes. Lighter, lighter, lighter. Su Ming grabbed the gigantic black wooden club and swung it around on the spot. Its weight became lighter, and eventually, Su Ming could practically not feel its weight at all. Once he swung it up, he leaped up and slammed it against the ground. The instant the gigantic wooden club crashed against the ground trembled, and a powerful rebound came from the wooden club. It charged straight into Su Ming's body through his right hand, causing him to freeze for a moment. He was forced to let go of the club and took a few steps back. His face alternated between red and white, and he only recovered after a long while. If I can only use it lightly, then this item and the risk I took previously wouldn't be worth it. Su Ming took a few steps forward and picked up the wooden club once again. He looked at the 9 teeth on it, and, after a moment of hesitation, he once again swung the club. He did not leap forward, but the instant he swung it and smashed it against the ground, heavy. With that one word, when the wooden club smashed into the ground, its weight increased explosively without end. When it landed on the ground, a shocking boom swiftly rang out. Soon after, the ground trembled, and a gigantic crack spread out with loud cracking sounds. It spread out into the distance, actually passing through the seal Hong Luo had set up and appearing on the ground outside. As it spread out, it was several tens of thousands of feet long. Blood trickled down the corners of Su Ming's mouth. He lost his grip on the wooden club in his hand, causing it to bounce back and fall on the ground by his side. Booming sounds rang out once again. Su Ming's breathing quickened. He looked at the wooden club in the distance, then at the gigantic crack on the ground. He suddenly started laughing, and his laughter grew louder. I am the patriarch of White Bull Tribe, and I would like to meet you, Lord Soulcatcher. Sir, do you still remember me? I was the one who prepared 3 virgins from the tribe for you. As Su Ming laughed, a faint voice filled with flattery came from the crack on the ground. The voice came from inside the crack, but it actually came from the ground outside the prison. The old man with a protruding mouth and ape-like chin from the White Bull Tribe was pale. He looked at the crack that had suddenly appeared 30 feet in front of him and broke out in a cold sweat. Son of AB *TCH, who was the one who chopped off people's heads and made this crack suddenly appear. You scare me to death. The old man wiped off his sweat. The monthly votes might be few, but they promised that they would last until 4 chapters were released, so they would not be few. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 450. When he heard the old man's voice coming from the crack and that strange tone, Su Ming immediately remembered the monkey-faced patriarch of White Bull Tribe. Su Ming could not say that he hated or liked that person, but the sight of him giving up on mobilizing his entire tribe to attack him when he sent 3 women from his tribe to him left a deep impression on him. When Su Ming heard the old man's words, he pondered over it for a moment before he walked out. The ground was empty, but there was a spot where a gigantic crack had appeared out of nowhere, and it spread into the distance. The old man from White Bull Tribe was standing right outside the crack. When he saw that there was no movement after waiting for a long time, he went to the crack and stuck his head in to look inside. Tortoise! The old man did not even hear Su Ming's laughter from within the seal. He only came here once every few days, and once he came, he would walk around the place multiple times and speak just now. At that moment, he did not know that his voice had already reached Su Ming's ears. He looked at the crack and started mumbling under his breath. Tortoise what? Before the old man could finish mumbling, Su Ming's cold voice immediately came from behind him, causing the old man to be momentarily stunned. Once he quickly turned around, pleasant surprise appeared on his face. I'm not a tortoise. Greetings, great soul catcher. The old man quickly wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed deeply towards Su Ming. Su Ming cast the old man a glance, and did not speak. The old man was wary and was also sizing up Su Ming from the corner of his eye. When he saw the mark of the peach blossom at the center of Su Ming's brows, he quickly averted his gaze and put on a fawning look. "Sir, I prepared quite a number of women for my tribe this time. I guarantee that you'll be satisfied with them. If you're not satisfied, then I'll be a tortoise from now on." "What tortoise? Don't use the word tortoise." Su Ming frowned. Yes, then I'll change it to a moron." The old man quickly nodded his head and smiled obsequiously. When Su Ming saw the old man's expression, he swept his profound gaze past the old man. He remembered that the old man knew how to adapt to circumstances. It did not matter whether it was their initial contact or his decisive act of giving away the 3 women from his tribe. It was enough to tell him that the old man was definitely not what he appeared to be. "We want." "Speak," Su Ming said calmly. The old man was slightly nervous. When Su Ming's gaze swept past him, he immediately had a feeling as if his heart had been seen through. That feeling of being naked before someone made him instinctively avoid Su Ming's gaze. "It's actually nothing much." The old man hesitated for a moment. When he said this, Su Ming turned around and walked into the distance, no longer bothering himself with the old man. The old man stared blankly for a moment, then hurriedly took a few steps forward and smiled apologetically. "Sir, wait. This is actually something that's difficult to talk about. It's like this. Sir, you know that the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands will arrive in a few years. Right now, all the tribes in the land of the shamans have started migrating. But the White Bull tribe is too small, and there are many ordinary tribesmen. With my strength alone, even with the help of the tribe's experts, I still won't be able to protect the tribe. So, this lowly one wants to ask if my lord is willing to accept the employment." Su Ming's footsteps faltered, and he turned his head around to look at the old man. "What will your tribe use to hire me? If there's really something that can tempt you, why do you insist on looking for me?" "Sir, the most powerful berserker in the area is Madame G, but she's already gone missing." When the old man said this, he became much more cautious, and he even cast a glance at the mark of the peach blossom at the center of Su Ming's brows. "This is a remote place. Most of the powerful berserkers won't come here. Besides, we're at war right now, so it's really difficult to find trustworthy, powerful berserkers. Sir, we can be considered as neighbors here. I can still trust you. As for what you're going to use to hire me, I'll bring out our ancestors' priceless treasure. It's also the sacred item that White Bull tribe has been worshipping ever since we left." When the old man said this, there was a hint of anguish in his voice. "Oh, if you give away your tribe's sacred item, it'll be the same as breaking the roots of your tribe." Su Ming knew that each tribe in the land of the shamans had different items that they worshipped. Some of them contained mysterious powers, and some of them were ordinary items. Yet no matter what, they were the souls of a tribe. Just like the lizard statue in Lizard Shaman tribe, the crane in Black Crane tribe, and the mackerel pike in Autumn Sea tribe. If I don't give you this item, it'll be difficult for me to move you. If the tribe stays here and doesn't migrate, then we'll die and be destroyed by the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands. But even if we leave, this small tribe will only have a slim chance of survival. No one knows just how many of us will survive in the end. In fact, there's a high possibility that all of us will die. If that's the case, then what's the use of this sacred item? Instead of keeping it according to our ancestors' teachings, it'd be better to bring it out in exchange for a chance of survival." The old man spoke with great difficulty. In truth, he had thought about these words for a long time before he decided to ask Su Ming for help. Through the few times they met, he had slowly come to understand Su Ming's personality. He was the type of person who would not cause trouble if no one provoked him. More importantly, if Su Ming had the intention to snatch it, then he would not have waited until now to attack. "I can't agree to this. I won't be leaving this place for the time being." Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he shook his head. When the old man heard his words, a slightly disappointed look appeared on his face, but by the looks of it, he seemed to have been prepared for Su Ming's answer a long time ago. At that moment, he spoke once again. "Sir, you have your difficulties. We of White Bull tribe understand this. How about this? We don't need you to protect our tribe when we migrate. We just need you to help 2 of our tribe members pass the seal of soul catchers with what little time you have left. We'll also give you our tribe's sacred item as payment. Sir, what do you think? Seal of soul catchers? How do you need my help? Tell me about it first. I might not agree to it. This was the first time Su Ming had heard of this term. Sir, you're a soul catcher, so you've naturally gone through the seal of soul catchers before. The old man from White Bull tribe was momentarily stunned, and a faint glint appeared in his eyes. I've gone through the seal of soul catchers before, but I've never been helped or helped others before. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever as he spoke lightly. Your Excellency is from a large tribe, so it's no wonder that you don't know about helping us. Sigh, I'm not afraid that you'll laugh at me about this, but the chances of a soul catcher appearing in a small tribe like ours are very small. Even if one does appear, most of them are unable to pass the soul catcher's restriction alone and obtain the inheritance of the soul catcher. Hence, we have the phenomenon of asking for help from experts. Next month will be the month of souls. Sir, you know that the month of souls is the month of inheritance for the soul catchers in the sorcerer goddess shrine. During this month, the tribesmen who are found to have the physique to cultivate the soul catchers in each tribe will sense the sorcerer goddess shrine's call. Then, the sorcerer goddess shrine will activate the soul catcher's teleportation with its unique power. At that time, the 2 tribesmen from White Bull tribe, whom I've found to possess the constitution of a soul catcher, will be sent out by the power of the god of Shaman's temple to the world of Nine. If they possess a serendipity, they will be acknowledged by the candle dragon there, and from there, they will be able to become soul catchers. I hope that you can use the power of teleportation as a guide to help them successfully become a soul catcher. Once the old man from White Bull tribe finished speaking, he looked at Su Ming nervously. This was the last method he could think of. If Su Ming did not agree to it, then White Bull tribe would have to forcefully migrate. Su Ming fell into pensive silence for a moment before he shook his head. He did not know much about this, and when he first heard about it, it did not sound too attractive to him. Sir, this is the first time you're helping someone become a soul catcher. In truth, from what I know, there are plenty of soul catchers who take the initiative to use the chance of those with the constitution of a soul catcher being relocated to the world of Nine during the month of souls to go with them. This is because every soul catcher will only be relocated the first time. If they want to enter the world of Nine again, they will have to rely on someone else's power of teleportation to guide them. It's not just soul catchers either. Spirit mediums, thought soothsayers, and other shamans will also use the chance to go there because you must know about the legend in the world of Nine. There's a candle dragon's corpse buried there. There's even a rumor that the mysterious curse also came from the world of Nine. That's why when the world of Nine was discovered, it was originally an ancient ruin. There are plenty of places in there that most of the shamans have not explored before. Only a small part of it became a place for soul catchers. Once we discovered this place, we started researching the curse. The old man spoke in great detail. With his intelligence, he would not have spoken in such detail if he was talking to another shaman. After all, this was not something that was too much of a secret in the shaman tribe. Yet now, when he spoke of it in such great detail, it was clear that the old man's intelligence had allowed him to see that something was off about Su Ming. However, he did not care about Su Ming's origins. The only thing he was concerned about was the safety of his tribe. Besides, Su Ming's strength made it so that even if the old man saw some clues, he would definitely pretend that he did not know anything. He would also not tell anyone about this and bring disaster to himself and his tribe. There was a ghost of a smile on Su Ming's lips as he looked at the old man. He did not speak. The old man let out a fake cough before he continued speaking. The berserkers will also find a way to enter the world of Nine because there's a plant called the Nine Abyss flower there. It can increase the chances of a berserker surviving the life and death disaster that will take them to enter the berserker soul realm after attaining great completion in the bone sacrifice realm. Also, the world of Nine is an ancient ruin. There might be quite a bit of serendipity in there. The old man continued speaking, but Su Ming still had that ghost of a smile on his face, and it made the old man's skin crawl. Tell me your true goal, Su Ming said slowly. I wouldn't dare hide this from you, sir. My goal is for these two tribesmen to obtain soul catchers there. With their potential, they should be able to catch the attention of some middle-sized tribes. It would be best if they could come and help us migrate. If they can't do this, then even if they're taken away, they will still be able to preserve the bloodline of White Bull tribe. Even if it's the worst, if they can find other powerful berserkers and form a deal with White Bull tribe, it will still be much better than it is now. The old man spoke with a wry smile. After a moment of hesitation, he suddenly lifted his right hand and seized the air in his bosom. A dark light shone in his bosom, and a round object appeared in his outstretched hand. This is our tribe's sacred item. Sir, you could take it first. Once Su Ming swept his gaze past the round object, his pupils shrank, and a huge storm suddenly raged in his heart. This is... Su Ming waved his arm and immediately seized the round object in his hand. The 4th chapter has already exploded. Can I write the 5th chapter? It'll continue exploding tomorrow, and I'll go against the current. I refuse to believe it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 451. This week, another 3 consecutive days had passed. Today was the first day, and 4 chapters had been released. I want to know, for +4 or 2 + 2 + 8, which do you prefer? I really don't know what to do. I can only write about 5 chapters a day at most. If I write 6 chapters, I'll be useless the next day. Even if I write 5 chapters, I won't be able to last 2 days. If you like the former, I'll continue to release my chapters like this. If you like the latter, then I'll update 2 chapters tomorrow and save 2 chapters. I'll put them together with the weekend's update. Use today's monthly vote to tell me the answer. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.